Star Wars looks like an adventure. Heroes and droids, a war between light and dark, all set to a soaring score. But underneath that adventure sits a galaxy that is genuinely horrifying, and it has been that way for a very long time. This is a galaxy where a gentle caretaker can turn into something that devours minds across entire star systems, where creatures evolved to hunt the Force itself and left nothing behind but statues of ash, where a whole planet can be kept burning on purpose for thousands of years because someone decided its pain was useful, and where the smartest thing the galaxy ever did was simply refuse to go somewhere. The heroes and villains most people know are only the surface. None of these horrors needed a Death Star or a Sith army to be frightening. Beneath the familiar galaxy sits an older and stranger one, and very little of it is safe to look at closely. None of what follows is exaggeration, and none of it is invented. Every piece comes straight from Star Wars Canon and Legends, the two official branches of the saga. Some of these horrors are ancient history, others are still out there right now, and a few of them quietly explain why the galaxy turned out the way it did. These are the stories the saga usually keeps in the background, and they make the rest of it feel a great deal less friendly. It starts with the single most dangerous thing the Force has ever produced, not a Sith Lord, and not a warlord with a fleet at his back, something far older than either one, born long before the Jedi or the Sith existed at all, when the most powerful things in the galaxy were closer to gods than to people.
The galaxy was not always governed by Jedi and Sith. Long before the Republic, before lightsabers or temples, a different kind of Force user shaped the cosmos. As chronicled in the book Fate of the Jedi Apocalypse, these beings were called the Ones, and they existed on a plane beyond mortal understanding. The Father served as keeper of the balance, maintaining equilibrium between light and darkness across the galaxy. His children, the Son and the Daughter, embodied the living manifestations of those opposing forces. The son and daughter were not humanoid in any fixed sense. As beings of pure Force energy, they could take any form they desired. Killick historical records, preserved in stone panels for over 100,000 years, depicted them forming from the vapor of a geyser in an ancient world. According to the novel, the son appeared with a beast head and fiendish creatures after drinking from the font of power, a dark side nexus where strength could be drawn without limit. The daughter manifested with a luminous bird head after swimming in the pool of knowledge, a place where all that is past and all that is to come could be seen. These locations were not merely symbolic. The font of power and pool of knowledge represented tangible nexuses of Force energy, forbidden to mortals for reasons that would become devastatingly clear. Between these two extremes sat the throne of balance, upon which the course of the galaxy's future rested. The Ones cultivated civilizations throughout the galaxy in their own image, guiding species and cultures according to the principles only they understood. However, they were not perfect guardians. Balance was maintained through constant intervention, not wisdom or foresight. When civilizations were destroyed, the son and daughter would emerge from seclusion to stop the threat. The Killick panels shows the Ones at the height of their power, engaged in conflicts that shaped the early galaxy. Yet something crucial was missing from these records. The panels depict a father, a son, and a daughter, but there was no mother. The absence of that fourth figure tells a story the Ones tried to erase. Abeloth began her existence as something the Ones were not, mortal. As explained in Fate of the Jedi Apocalypse, she was at least 100,000 years old, but started as a mortal woman who served the celestial family as a caretaker. Her exact origins remain unclear, but her role was unmistakable. She tended to the son and daughter during their formative period, functioning as the maternal presence in a family of otherwise immortal beings. This arrangement created an inherent tragedy. While the father, son, and daughter never aged, Abeloth watched her own mortality advance with each passing year. The inequality became impossible to ignore. She was not a biological mother, but she had fulfilled that role in every meaningful way. The thought of leaving them, of being forgotten while they continued their cosmic work for millennia to come, filled her with desperation. The emotional bond she formed with the son and daughter made the prospect of separation unbearable. Her motivation was rooted in fear of abandonment and the desire to remain with those she loved. As she aged, her desperation manifested in behavior that troubled even the father. The father had warned all of them about the font of power and the pool of knowledge. These nexuses were forbidden precisely because their misuse carried consequences even the ones could not undo. Drinking from the font or swimming in the pool was explicitly prohibited, yet for Abeloth, mortality had become unbearable. She faced an impossible choice: accept her death and permanent separation from her family, or attempt the forbidden and risk consequences she could not predict. When the father's attention turned elsewhere, Abeloth made her choice. The decision came during a moment of distraction. As preserved in Killik panels, the son was attacking the father while the daughter attempted to defend him, and he was occupied hurling force lightning at both his children. While his attention was focused elsewhere, Abeloth seized her opportunity. The elderly woman crept to the font of power and drank, fully aware that she was violating the father's most serious prohibition. The font of power was a dark side nexus where limitless strength could be drawn. For beings like the sun, who was already a creature of pure force energy, drinking from it simply reinforced his nature. For a mortal woman, the effect was devastating. The dark side energy flooded through her body with no natural outlet or containment. She was granting herself power her mortal form was never designed to hold. Then she went further and swam in the pool of knowledge. She appeared in the water much younger looking, sly and defiant, as the father used the force to pull her out. She had done what was forbidden not once, but twice. The pool of knowledge offered a vision of all that is past and all that is to come. Knowledge no mortal mind could contain without fracturing. The transformation was immediate and irreversible. Abeloth's hair turned coarse and long, her nose flattened, and her once sparkling eyes sank into darkness until only 2 pinpoints of light remained visible. Her physical form was rewriting itself in response to energies it could not properly channel. Her fingers elongated into tentacles, lashing out toward the cowering daughter and glowering son as the family watched in horror. The father stepped forward to shield his children from what she had become. What Abeloth had done could not be undone. She had wanted to remain with her family forever. Instead, she had become something they could no longer recognize. The woman who raised them was gone, replaced by something the ones would have to imprison. Abeloth's corruption went beyond her monstrous appearance. She could no longer maintain a stable form. Her face would shift constantly, taking hints from anyone she spent time with. Sometimes she appeared as nothing more than a swirling halo of force energy presenting itself in female form, because mortal minds could not comprehend her true nature. Other times, she seemed exactly what she claimed to be, a lonely castaway desperate for companionship. Her abilities reflected this corruption. Abeloth could float through the air without needing to leap, drifting while her features transformed mid-flight. Her hair would grow dark and coarser, her face would broaden, yet her gray eyes remained constant. The Killiks came to call her the bringer of chaos. They viewed her as the counterpart to the father's role as keeper of the balance, associating her with strife and violence. According to their understanding, war was part of the galaxy's cycle of change, and when it grew too powerful, Abeloth came to destroy the old order and make room for something new, leaving entire civilizations in ruins. The devastation forced a response. The son and daughter, who normally existed in opposition to each other, formed a pact when Abeloth destroyed the civilizations their father had cultivated. However, imprisoning her required more than their combined power. The ones created Center Point Station to reinforce whatever prison they constructed, and they relied on the Thurit Hive, a specific Killik nest whose entire purpose became imprisoning Abeloth. The son and daughter imprisoned her, but this was not a permanent solution. Abeloth could not be killed. She could only be contained, and that containment required constant effort from beings powerful enough to enforce it. The Killiks understood they would need to spend the next century building up their numbers to be ready when called into service again. Yet, even in imprisonment, Abeloth retained frightening capabilities. When she was near, predatory plants that would normally attack organics refused to do so in her presence. She could imprison others through methods that remained unclear, such as when she trapped a Sith master named Zal in a cocoon. She existed simultaneously in multiple locations, possessing separate bodies that functioned independently while remaining extensions of her fractured consciousness. For thousands of years, the prison held. Then, the ones died, and everything changed. The father, son, and daughter were not truly immortal after all. During the Clone Wars, Jedi Knight Anakin Skywalker and his master Obi-Wan Kenobi encountered the Ones on their world of Mortis. As Luke Skywalker would later recount in Fate of the Jedi Apocalypse, the father was dying, and he recognized something in Anakin, a potential balance that might allow him to take the father's place as keeper of the balance. He asked Anakin to assume his role and maintain equilibrium between the son and daughter. When Anakin refused to take the father's place, the son and daughter went to war over who would replace him. The conflict escalated until all three Ones were slain, and their world died with them. Anakin's refusal had set off a terrible chain of events. With the Ones dead, the carefully maintained prison began to fail. Center Point Station remained, but without the Ones to guide the containment, Abeloth's bonds weakened. Then came the final blow that shattered her prison completely. During the war against Sith Lord Darth Caedus, Center Point Station was destroyed. Jacen Solo had become Darth Caedus in his drive to change the vision he had seen, and his actions during the Second Civil War led directly to Center Point's destruction. Without the station's reinforcement, the last restraint on Abeloth's prison broke. The ancient evil stirred in her failing containment, testing the barriers and searching for weakness until she finally found it. Abeloth reached out across the galaxy through the Force, searching for minds she could reach. During the war with the Yuuzhan Vong, decades after the Ones' deaths, she found them. The Jedi had hidden their youngest students at a facility called Shelter, keeping Force-sensitive younglings safe from an enemy that could not sense them through the Force. But Abeloth could sense them perfectly. She reached into their minds, and they felt something dark and cold wrap around them. One of them was Ben Skywalker, son of Luke Skywalker and Mara Jade, still an infant when Abeloth's presence entered his awareness. Ben felt a cold tendril of fear sink deep inside him. The connection was real, physical in a way that transcended normal Force bonds, not metaphor or imagination. The tendril knotted up inside him, its cold filaments anchoring into his heart and chest. The contact frightened Ben so badly that he closed himself off from the Force entirely. For years afterward, he refused to access the Force, refused to train as a Jedi, refused to acknowledge the gift that should have been his birthright. His parents could not understand why. How could they explain to anyone that something had reached across the galaxy to claim their son, something that wanted him in ways they could not comprehend or prevent? Abeloth had not tried to hurt Ben. She had not threatened him or spoken to him directly. She had simply reached out with need, with terrible loneliness and hunger, and marked him as hers. Even decades later, long after Ben had reopened himself to the Force and become a Jedi Knight, he could still feel that tendril inside him because Abeloth had never let go. She wanted Ben for her own. She had always wanted him, and she was patient enough to wait. But Ben was not the only one Abeloth had reached. Other young Jedi at Shelter felt her presence that day, though most were too young to remember or understand what had happened. The contact left marks on them all, invisible scars that would not manifest for decades. When Abeloth finally escaped her prison completely, those scars became doorways. Young Jedi across the galaxy suddenly began experiencing psychosis. They looked at their families, their friends, their teachers, and saw strangers wearing familiar faces. They became convinced that everyone they knew had been replaced by imposters. Some grew violent, attacking those closest to them while screaming accusations of deception. Others simply fled, disappearing into the underworld of Coruscant or the wild spaces between stars. The Jedi Order had no explanation. The affected knights showed no signs of darkside corruption. Medical scans revealed nothing wrong, yet they remained utterly convinced that their loved ones were gone, replaced by exact duplicates who were fooling everyone but them. Two Jedi, Valen and Gisela Horn, had to be frozen in carbonite to prevent them from hurting others or themselves. No one understood what was happening until it was almost too late. Abeloth had not simply contacted these Jedi when they were young, she had planted seeds in their minds, connections that lay dormant for years. When she finally escaped, she activated those connections. The young Jedi were not experiencing psychosis. they were experiencing Abeloth's reality. Through her eyes, everyone looked like imposters because Abeloth could not comprehend a stable identity. Her own form shifted constantly, taking pieces from everyone around her. When she looked at others through her victim's eyes, she saw the same instability she embodied. The madness spread as more Jedi fell under her influence. Even Alana Solo, granddaughter of Han and Leia, detected Abeloth's presence near Kessel, describing it as something waiting in space that wanted to know who she was, something both sad and frightening. The threat was growing, and no one understood what they were truly facing. Luke Skywalker stood in the ancient Killik Hive, staring at stone panels that had not been disturbed in over 100,000 years. The carvings told a story the Jedi had never heard, a history that predated their order by millennia. As he studied the panels with Jedi Masters Raynar Thule and Tekli, the truth about the threat they faced finally became clear. The panels showed the ones at the height of their power, a mortal woman serving them and aging while they remained unchanged. The carvings depicted her transformation, her imprisonment, and most importantly, what happened when she escaped. According to the Killiks, Abeloth was the bringer of chaos, and when she emerged, civilizations fell. Luke finally understood what he was dealing with, and the knowledge filled him with dread. Abeloth was not some rogue darksider or power-hungry Sith Lord. She was something older and more dangerous than anything the Jedi had faced in living memory. The young Jedi suffering from apparent psychosis were not sick. They were under Abeloth's control, marked decades ago when she had first reached out from her failing prison. But Luke was not the only one searching for answers about Abeloth. Far across the galaxy, another group had encountered her directly, and they had very different ideas about how to handle the situation. The lost tribe of the Sith had remained hidden on the planet Kesh for 5,000 years, descendants of a crashed Sith vessel who had built an entire civilization around darkside teachings. They had recently emerged from isolation, and one of their ships had ventured into the Maw, a cluster of black holes where navigation was nearly impossible. There, they found Abeloth. High Lord Talon, leader of the Sith expedition, brought his apprentice Vistara Kai to meet the being they had discovered. Vistara encountered Abeloth on a jungle planet near the Maw, and what she experienced defied explanation. The Sith were dying at an alarming rate. Those who interacted directly with Abeloth often did not survive, and even those who simply stayed near her for extended periods began to show signs of mental deterioration. Abeloth was not a tool they could control. She was a threat to Sith and Jedi alike. Talon contacted Luke Skywalker with a proposal. Despite thousands of years of enmity and blood spilled between their orders since the first schism, he suggested they work together. The Jedi and Sith wanted the same thing, to stop Abeloth before she could spread her influence further. Both had already lost people to her power. Continuing to work separately would only get more of them killed. Luke listened to the proposal in his quarters above the Jade Shadow, his son Ben standing beside him. The idea of working with Sith was almost inconceivable. The Sith had manipulated galactic politics, orchestrated wars, and betrayed every ally they had ever claimed. Trusting them seemed like inviting disaster. But Ben surprised his father by speaking in favor of the alliance. He had worked with Vistara before on Dathomir, and that cooperation had saved Luke's life. The Lost Tribe's Sith were different from the Sith of old. They came from an entire civilization built on Sith teachings, which meant that they had learned how to cooperate instead of constantly betraying each other. Vistara had already proved such cooperation was possible, Ben argued. Luke made his decision, knowing it might be the most controversial choice of his career as Grand Master. Luke acknowledged they had one common goal, and that it would be better to work together rather than to get in each other's way. However, he made it clear that he would be expecting treachery at every turn, reminding Talon that few enmities were more ancient than that of Sith and Jedi. Talon accepted the terms with what sounded like genuine respect. This alliance, he acknowledged, had not seen since the galaxy was new. They would work together to confront Abeloth, and afterward, they would see where they stood. The terms were simple. Luke would keep Vistara aboard the Jade Shadow as insurance against Sith betrayal, while the Sith fleet would accompany Luke's forces to Abeloth's location. Vistara's father, Gavar Kai was not pleased with this arrangement. His daughter had become a hostage, regardless of what diplomatic language they used. But he accepted Luke's logic. If their positions were reversed, if Ben were aboard a Sith ship, Luke would want to keep him there as insurance too. It was a shrewd move, one that revealed Luke Skywalker understood how Sith thought. The alliance formed, but tensions ran high. Jedi and Sith vessels traveled together through hyperspace, each side watching the other for signs of treachery. Every communication was carefully worded. Every maneuver was scrutinized for hidden meaning. The Jedi had to be ready for betrayal at any moment, while the Sith had to prove they were serious about cooperation. Luke shared his findings from Sinkhole Station with Talon, information he would never normally give to a Sith. But if they were going to fight Abeloth effectively, both sides needed to know what they were facing. Luke had visited Sinkhole Station before, an ancient space station in the Maw connected to the Ones. He believed they would find more information there that could help them understand Abeloth's nature and weaknesses. The combined fleet entered the Maw, navigating the deadly gravitational forces that could tear ships apart if they strayed from safe routes. The twin black holes ahead looked uncomfortably like eyes watching them approach. Luke's son Ben piloted the Jade Shadow through the hazards with growing confidence. He had done this before, and Luke trusted him completely. Communication was spotty in the Maw. The Rockhound, a massive vessel, hovered over the smaller ships like a protective guardian, ready to latch onto any vessel that showed signs of drifting into the black hole. Or, as Luke privately told Lando Calrissian, ready to intercept any ship that showed hostile intent. The most unlikely alliance in galactic history was about to face its first real test. As they drew closer to Abeloth's world, Luke gathered his team to discuss strategy. He explained that his goal was not to destroy Abeloth, but to understand her and reason with her. He wanted to make her comprehend what she was doing, if that remained possible. Killing a sentient being should always be a last resort, and her death might mean the young Jedi under her control would never be released. The Sith listened to this plan with barely concealed skepticism, having come to eliminate a threat rather than negotiate with it. But they held their objections, at least for now. Talon had agreed to follow Luke's lead on this mission, though everyone knew the agreement would last only as long as it served Sith interests. What they did not know was that Abeloth had already infiltrated both governments. While the Jedi and Sith searched for her, Abeloth had quietly inserted herself into the Galactic Alliance's highest office. She had assumed the identity of Chief of State Rokari Kem, a blue-skinned Jessar female who now wielded political power on Coruscant. Through this position, she covertly aided the Lost Tribe's influence over the government, sowing chaos even as Jedi and Sith hunted her elsewhere. But that was not her only disguise. Abeloth had also spread her influence to the Imperial Remnant under another alias, Admiral Lydia Pergorsky. She allied with former Chief of State Natasi Dalla to spark conflict with the head of state Jagged Fel, further destabilizing the galaxy's leadership. Abeloth preyed on connections and relationships, exploiting them with cruel precision. She specifically targeted people from Luke Skywalker's past, possessing those he had once cared for. She took over Akana Norend, a Falanasi leader Luke had once been romantically involved with. Luke traveled to Piter to investigate, only to discover Abeloth had used Akana to manipulate the Falanasi into protecting her. Later, she manifested using the body of Callista Ming, another woman Luke had loved. These possessions were not random. Abeloth understood that by inhabiting people Luke cared about, she could torment him emotionally while hiding behind faces he could not bring himself to destroy. Luke managed to defeat Abeloth in those forms, freeing his friends, but her essence always escaped to a new vessel. Even High Lord Talon was not immune to her corruption. Talon bathed in the pool of knowledge, seeking the visions it offered. The immersion corrupted him. His eyes took on the same eerie glow as Abeloth's, pinpoints of light shining from dark wells. The pool had granted him terrible knowledge, but the price was his sanity. He began to transform into something else, something that served Abeloth rather than the Sith. The corruption drove him to madness. Vistara Kai recognized what was happening to her High Lord. Before Talon could become a monstrosity fully under Abeloth's thrall, Vistara made the difficult decision to kill him. The loss of their leader created fractures within the Sith Alliance, but it also proved that Abeloth's influence could corrupt even the most powerful dark-side users. When they finally reached the jungle planet where Abeloth waited, Luke could feel her presence like a weight on his chest. Everything they had learned, everything they had risked by allying with their ancient enemies had brought them to this critical moment. Jedi and Sith would face Abeloth together, and the outcome would determine the fate of every Force-sensitive being in the galaxy. What they did not know was that the real battle would not take place in the physical world at all. The comparison between Abeloth and the Sith reveals why she represented a different category of threat. Sith sought domination through ideology and control, building empires and enforcing their will upon others. Abeloth's approach was more intimate and invasive. She did not want servants or subjects. She wanted to possess Force users entirely, erasing their individual existence. Her promises revealed her twisted understanding of relationships. She told Ben he would become the eternal Prince of Light, burning the twin flames of justice and forgiveness. She told Vistara she would become the irresistible daughter of the night, guarding forbidden mysteries and bringing life to the galaxy by filling dreams with beauty and desire. The three of them would become the Ones, living forever and remaking the galaxy however it suited them. She offered a partnership, but her true intention was absorption. She possessed multiple bodies simultaneously. Luke Skywalker killed one of her physical forms, yet she continued operating through others. She spoke through different vessels, her voice taking on characteristics of whoever she had taken over, but with an edge so cold and vengeful, it was immediately identifiable. She was powerful and dangerous enough to force Grandmaster Luke Skywalker into an alliance with the Sith to fight her. Even the Sith themselves disagreed on how to handle her. Some saw her as a tool to exploit, a weapon to wield for their own glory. Others recognized that Sith were dying at an alarming rate simply from interacting with her. Abeloth's power made conventional approaches futile. She would grow into a being beyond mortal comprehension if not stopped. With the dark side hers to command, she could reshape the galaxy in any manner she wished. Her agony itself became a weapon, releasing nearly inconceivable amounts of Force energy. The final confrontation would take place across multiple battlefields simultaneously. Luke understood that Abeloth existed on multiple levels. Her physical forms were just extensions of her true self, which resided somewhere beyond the material world. To truly face her, he would need to follow ancient techniques practiced by beings called Mind Walkers, Force users who believed that physical existence was an illusion and that consciousness could separate from the body entirely. Luke secured himself in a bunk aboard the Rude Awakening and entered a meditative trance deeper than any he had attempted before. He focused on the code of the Mind Walkers. There is no life, there is only the Force. His consciousness separated from his physical form, rising above it, leaving the material world behind. He walked through a timeless void where seconds might last days, or days might pass in seconds. Luke arrived at the Lake of the Apparitions, a place that existed purely in the Force, where consciousness took form and could interact. This was the realm where Abeloth's true essence resided, and she was waiting for him. Her gray silhouette emerged from silver mists, long saffron hair cascading down to the water, tiny eyes shining from sockets as deep as wells. Luke reached for a lightsaber that did not exist in this place, but Abeloth struck first with Force lightning that blasted through him like physical agony. Then, someone else appeared, a tattooed man Luke had seen watching the conflict on Coruscant. The stranger was Sith, but not from the Lost Tribe. His face bore permanent ink markings that the Lost Tribe would never use, and his manner was harder, more ancient. When Luke questioned who he was, the stranger gave a cryptic answer. With the Ones gone, there was only one way to stop Abeloth: Jedi and Sith together. The Sith understood something about Abeloth that Luke did not. He moved with purpose, driving his fingers deep into Abeloth's form as Luke held her from behind. They grappled in ways that defied physical law, their essences merging and tearing, causing damage that no weapon in the material world could inflict. Tentacles lashed at Luke's face, probing for his eyes and mouth. One caught his right eye, and the socket exploded in pain. The stranger drove his hand deeper into Abeloth, searching for something vital to destroy. Black force energy sprayed from the wound as she writhed and howled. For what felt like hours or seconds, they battled across the surface of the Lake of Apparitions. Abeloth tried to drain Luke's essence, then the stranger's, then Luke's again. She threw force blasts that would have killed them instantly in the physical world. Her face shifted like melting wax, tentacles erupting from her torso as she lost control of her form. While Luke fought beyond shadows, Abeloth's avatars faced destruction in the physical world. Ben Skywalker and Vestara Kai had been captured by Abeloth and brought to the courtyard of the Font of Power. Abeloth attempted to force them to drink from the font, wanting to corrupt them as she had been corrupted. She had starved them, denied them water, knowing their desperation would eventually drive them to the Darkside Nexus. But Ben and Vestara resisted. When Abeloth attacked them in her Kashiri form as Lady Coralie, they fought back together. Vestara drew on the font's power to unleash devastating force lightning, while Ben used tactical diversion, hurling broken pillars at their enemy. The Kashiri avatar was powerful, but working together, Ben and Vestara finally destroyed that body at the Font of Power. On Coruscant, the Jedi strike team confronted Abeloth's presence in the temple's computer core. The avatar impersonating Chief of State Rakari Kem was eliminated, her political manipulation brought to an end. Every physical form Abeloth had created across the galaxy was being systematically destroyed. In the realm beyond shadows, the battle reached its climax. Abeloth attacked both Luke and the Sith at once, her tentacles piercing through them and destroying them from within in ways no lightsaber could match. But the Sith managed to drive his weapon through her chest. Her force essence began gushing out from the wound, but she continued fighting, her face shifting and tentacles erupting as she thrashed and howled. With her essence pouring out, she had to kill them immediately or face destruction. But Luke and the Sith refused to let go despite their wounds. When Luke finally observed her pale form beginning to vanish in the Lake of Apparitions, he watched her shrink from the size of a thigh to a foot, then a finger, then a mere sliver before slipping from sight. Back in the physical world, Luke's body screamed. His companions rushed to the medbay, where he lay unconscious with wounds that should not have been possible. His right eye was damaged, and he had injuries to his chest that medical droids could not explain. The wounds had been inflicted beyond shadows, in a realm where spirit fought spirit. It marked the end of one of the most dangerous beings the galaxy had ever known. With Abeloth's death, the effects of her influence began to lift. The Jedi Knights who had been driven insane by her presence finally returned to normal. Valen and Gisela Horn emerged from carbonite freezing with their minds restored. The delusions about imposters vanished along with Abeloth's corrupting touch. The young Jedi who had been marked as children at Shelter were finally free. Abeloth's threat surpassed even the Sith. Her danger came not from ambition, but from refusal to accept natural loss, and that made her different from any Darkside user in galactic history.
Abeloth was a single being, and the whole galaxy feared what she could do. But the most disturbing things out there are not always the most powerful. A handful are nothing more than life forms, hidden in the corners no one ever bothered to map. Some of the weirdest creatures in Star Wars evolved in total isolation, developing biological traits that seem to defy the natural laws of the galaxy. These species represent the extreme limits of evolution. As explorers pushed into the unknown, they found that these life forms didn't just inhabit worlds, but defined them, often serving as the primary obstacle or unexpected guide for those moving through the stars. By exploring both Canon and Legends archives, we find a galaxy where the expansion of civilization was shaped by the existence of these bizarre, alien residents. In the lower levels of Coruscant, entire walls occasionally collapse for no apparent reason. Engineers investigating these failures sometimes discover winding tunnels bored directly through support structures that were designed to last for centuries. The damage does not resemble explosives or machinery. Instead, the interior surfaces appear melted and rehardened, as though the structure itself had been slowly eaten from the inside. The organism responsible is the Duracrete slug, a pale burrowing lifeform that feeds on the same composite material used to construct the planet-wide city. Rather than living in soil or stone, the creature treats architecture as its natural environment. It moves through buildings by secreting corrosive digestive fluids that break down duracrete, ferrocrete, and other construction compounds. As the material is processed, the slug excretes the materials through its skin, forming a dense shell that gradually thickens as the animal grows. Urban planners rarely design cities with burrowing organisms that eat the buildings themselves, but some parasites are even more invasive, choosing not to hollow out structures, but to take control of living bodies. A brain beetle crawls quietly across the surface of a fallen creature before slipping beneath the skull through a natural opening. Once inside, the parasite begins interacting directly with the host's nervous system. Legend sources describing unusual parasitic organisms mention the brain beetle as one of the more disturbing examples. These small arthropods survive by inserting themselves into the cranial cavities of larger animals, where they stimulate nerve pathways to control basic motor functions. The host body continues to move as if it were alive. Limbs respond to stimuli, eyes can still track motion, and the creature may even continue walking or feeding depending on how intact the nervous system remains. To an outside observer, the animal appears normal at first glance, which is part of what allows the parasite to survive undetected. Creatures like this blur the line between parasite and puppeteer. Another lifeform survives in a far stranger way, thriving in the harsh machinery that provides water on desert worlds. A vaporator slug coils around the interior piping of a moisture vaporator, absorbing the minerals that accumulate inside the machinery. To settlers depending on these devices for survival, the presence of such an organism can quickly become a serious problem. In Legends descriptions of life on Tatooine, colonists occasionally discover these slugs living inside the equipment used to harvest water from the atmosphere. The animals are drawn to the mineral residue left behind during the vapor condensation process. Soft and flexible tissue allows the slug to move through narrow mechanical channels. Specialized digestive enzymes break down mineral deposits, enabling the creature to extract nutrients directly from the metal-lined pipes. Its feeding slowly erodes the internal surfaces of the machinery. Over time, the slug widens small mineral cavities into hollow chambers large enough for its body to coil inside. Hidden within the sealed structure of the device, it can go unnoticed for months. Parasites hiding inside survival equipment can threaten a community without ever being seen. Larger predators, however, make their presence known immediately, and the next one is huge enough to be ridden across open terrain. A Sleen moves across the desert with a long, muscular body carried on powerful limbs. Its reptilian head sweeps slowly from side to side as it scans the terrain ahead. In legend sources, Sleens are associated with swamp environments, and one trained Sleen named Shadow was kept on Droman Kos. The creature can maintain a steady pace over uneven ground, which makes a trained specimen valuable to a handler moving through a difficult landscape, while Sleen remain formidable predators that rely on their strength and speed to overpower prey in open terrain. Their presence in swamp habitats places them among the larger hunters of those environments. Creatures like the Sleen show how even formidable predators can be integrated into daily life on frontier worlds. Some organisms, however, remain impossible to control, and the next one waits motionless beneath the sand for prey to fall into its grasp. A Sarlacc rests beneath the sands of Tatooine, with only its gaping mouth exposed at the surface. Rows of inward curving teeth circle a deep funnel-shaped pit in the desert, while thick, muscular tentacles emerge whenever the sand shifts too close to the edge. The movie Return of the Jedi places the Great Pit of Carkoon as the center of Jabba the Hutt's theater of horror, a public execution site built around an organism already waiting below. Luke Skywalker and Han Solo narrowly escaped the pit during Jabba's failed attempt to feed them to the creature. The Sarlacc is a complex organism that has existed since Tatooine's early eras. In Legends lore, it is even capable of a twisted form of telepathy, merging its consciousness with its victims so they remain mentally aware during the centuries under its slow digestion. Most of the Sarlacc's body lies deep beneath the desert floor. Its mouth forms a vertical shaft lined with rows of mucus-covered teeth that point downward, making escape physically impossible once a victim slides past the rim. Beneath the sand, the organism extends a network of roots through the surrounding soil, drawing moisture and nutrients to supplement its diet of flesh. A labyrinthine stomach lined with enzymes breaks down organic matter at a glacial pace. This slow metabolism allows the Sarlacc to survive for thousands of years on little food, making it one of the most efficient and horrifying predators in the Outer Rim. Those crossing the Dune Sea mark Sarlacc pits in their star charts and maps. The sand may conceal a predator that has been waiting in the same spot since the era of the Old Republic. A patch of desert becomes a sentence once cartilage, roots, and digestive slime are waiting underneath it. What follows is a hunter that refuses to stay rooted anywhere, turning sealed transport decks into places where every wall can suddenly matter. A Rathtar drags itself down a narrow corridor with coiling, slime-covered tentacles, reeling victims inward until they disappear into its gaping mouth. These creatures are the embodiment of pure, unthinking hunger. They move using their suction-padded limbs to navigate the ceilings and floors of starships. In the cold metal hallways of a freighter, the sound of a Rathtar is a wet, slapping cadence that signals an inescapable end for anyone it catches. In the film The Force Awakens, Han Solo and Chewbacca attempted to transport 3 captured Rathtars when a containment failure let them loose among armed smugglers and gang enforcers. The Rathtars hunted the mercenaries with relentless, pack-like efficiency. Rathtars have a spherical mass of hyper-dense muscle without a single rigid bone. Thick, sensory-rich tentacles surround the central body, and each limb can grip metal surfaces or crush armor through powerful suction pads. The creature's tentacles coil and tighten around its prey, dragging the victim towards a circular mouth lined with rows of serrated teeth. Stories surrounding the infamous Trilia massacre help build the Rathtar's reputation as the most dangerous cargo in the entire world. During that event, a small group of Rathtars decimated an entire colony in a matter of hours. Despite this, smugglers pay exorbitant prices for these living weapons, using them as final deterrents or status symbols. However, as Han Solo learned, the cost of carrying a Rathtar is often paid in the lives of the crew, as no cage in the galaxy is truly Rathtar-proof once the creature smells food. A ship full of compartments becomes useless when the thing pursuing you can grip every surface at once. After that comes a life form that makes shelter itself the mistake, because the cave ahead is really a throat. An Exogorth holds its enormous mouth open within the hollowed-out shell of an asteroid, waiting for minerals, debris, or a stray starship to fly inside. These silicon-based behemoths are among the largest life forms in the galaxy, capable of growing to lengths of nearly 900 meters. They do not breathe oxygen or require a pressurized atmosphere, thriving instead in the cold vacuum of space. They anchor to the interior of rocky planetoids where they can safely digest the ores of their habitat. To a pilot seeking refuge, the entrance to an Exogorth skullet looks like a jagged cave, but the stone floor is actually a layer of reactive, translucent muscle. In the film The Empire Strikes Back, Han Solo piloted the Millennium Falcon into what appeared to be a gigantic, hollow asteroid while escaping a relentless Imperial blockade, only to discover that the cavern walls were part of a living predator. Their skin is thick enough to withstand the bombardment of micrometeoroids and the intense radiation of deep space. A circular opening ringed with massive, calcified teeth leads into digestive chambers where powerful acids break down raw minerals and ship hulls alike. Lacking a traditional respiratory system, it breathes by absorbing stellar winds through its skin, turning solar energy into the chemical fuel needed to drive its massive muscles. In the Anoat system and the Hoth asteroid belt, the space slug remains the ultimate apex predator of the void. In the vacuum of space, even the terrain can be alive and hungry. A pilot looking for cover can land inside something older, softer, and far more patient than stone. Smaller parasites follow next, and they do not need an asteroid when a power line will do. The Mynock is a silicon-based parasite that breathes electrical current and survives the vacuum of deep space by metabolizing starship fuel. It exists in a state of non-stop hunger for raw energy, making it the primary menace of long-haul freighter pilots and deep space explorers. To a Mynock, a light freighter is a floating banquet of high-voltage power lines and fusion reactor leakage. In the canon film The Empire Strikes Back, Han Solo and Princess Leia discovered an infestation of these creatures, which highlighted the Mynock's most problematic trait, its ability to latch onto a hull and remain undetected while it systematically drains the ship's reserves. In swarms, a single Mynock is rarely the issue, but a dozen or more will converge on a ship's power conduits, which can lead to engine failure or the total breakdown of life support systems. Its biology departs from most vacuum life in one crucial way. It breathes by absorbing ions and electrical particles directly through its skin and its specialized feeding mouth. This mouth functions as a biological ground wire. Once it seals against a power cable or a ship's hull, it creates a closed circuit, letting the Mynock siphon energy directly into its own nervous system. Furthermore, their wings are not used for flight, but act as solar sails and thermal radiators to regulate internal temperature. The danger of the Mynock is its rapid reproductive cycle when exposed to high-energy environments. If a Mynock manages to get inside a ship's engineering deck, it can split into two separate organisms within hours by overfeeding on the ship's reactor. To remove them, crews often have to use high-intensity ultraviolet light or manual scrapers, as the Mynock's grip is chemically reinforced to withstand hyperspace travel. Out in vacuum, even a minor parasite can strip a vessel down to failing systems. Another survivor prefers rot, sludge, and the places maintenance crews hate to inspect. Most famously known as the trash monster of the Death Star, the Dianoga is a highly adaptable survivor found in sewers, garbage compactors, and toxic swamps across the galaxy. The Dianoga is a master of camouflage, possessing a translucent gelatinous body that takes on the color and texture of the sludge it inhabits. This cephalopod-like scavenger has a hydroskeletal frame and a single retractable sensory stalk that can rotate 360 degrees. It can grow up to 10 meters in length, while hiding in a pool of waste only a few meters deep. In the canon film A New Hope, Luke Skywalker was nearly drowned by a Dianoga residing in the Death Star's trash compactor. The creature was later identified in the canon short story The Baptist as Omi, a rare, semi-sentient member of the species. Omi possessed a crude connection to the Force, viewing the encounter with Luke as a spiritual event rather than a simple predatory attack. What sets the Dianoga apart is its biological adaptability to toxicity. It grows in environments that would be lethal to almost any other organism, including heavy metal runoff, raw sewage, and radioactive waste. Its skin is coated in a specialized mucus that neutralizes most industrial chemicals, so it can consume bacteria and organic matter found in garbage without suffering poisoning. The Dianoga pulls water through its body, moving silently without creating ripples on the surface. Its tentacles are lined with sensory pits that detect minute pressure waves, meaning it can hear the heartbeat of a creature standing by its pool. For maintenance crews, the only sign of its presence is often the faint, rhythmic thumping of its heart against the pipes. Beneath floating garbage and chemical runoff, an eye on a stalk can keep an entire pool under watch. At a glance, the following creature appears harmless, but some birds in this galaxy trail stranger currents than any predator does. The Convor is a small, owl-like avian that occupies a unique intersection between natural biology and cosmic mysticism. While they are physically native to worlds like Adelon and the moon of Waska, their significance comes from their role as spiritual barometers. A common freighter pilot sees a Convor as a feathered predator with a curved beak and a distinctive hoot. Force-sensitive observers often read far more into their presence. They're treated as manifestations of destiny, specifically tied to the Daughter, a powerful embodiment of the light side from the realm of Mortis. Morai, the most notable individual of the species, has shadowed Ahsoka Tano for decades. Morai's behavior defies standard avian ecology. She does not hunt for sustenance or seek out mates. Instead, she appears at pivotal historical junctures, acting as a silent witness to the tides of the Force. Morai was present during the Siege of Malachor and was even seen perched near the entrance to the World Between Worlds, a mystical dimension that exists outside of normal time and space. Physically, Convories are remarkably silent. They have a broad wingspan and gold-rimmed eyes that are highly effective at tracking movement in low-light environments. Their calls and appearances have been interpreted by some Force-sensitive observers as signs that important events are unfolding around them. While standard Convories on Waska might feed on small lizards, Morai's repeated appearances around major Force events makes her behavior difficult to explain through ordinary animal habits alone. Morai makes an ordinary silhouette carry the weight of prophecy. The next organism strips away free will altogether and leaves a body moving on borrowed commands. The Geonosian brainworm represents a horrific fusion of parasitic biology and hive mind necromancy. Unlike typical parasites that only consume nutrients, these pale, segmented invertebrates seek total neural control. They serve as the physical extensions of a Geonosian queen's will, allowing her to project command across vast distances. Its biology transforms a standard medical infection into a state of absolute mental and physical enslavement. As seen in the canon animated series The Clone Wars, the brainworm does not require a living host. By burrowing into a cadaver and stimulating the brainstem with electrical impulses, the parasite can reanimate the deceased. These undead hosts, whether Geonosian or clone trooper, exhibit a distinctive jerky gait as the worm manually overrides the motor cortex, telepathically linked to a central queen. An infested squad moves with a singular, terrifying coordination, making them far more lethal than standard mindless ghouls. The infection process is a showcase of invasive evolution. The worm typically enters a sleeping or restrained host through the nasal cavity, maneuvering towards the base of the skull. Once positioned, it deploys microscopic hook nodes to anchor itself directly into the host's central nervous system. It then secretes a cocktail of neuroinhibitors that paralyze the host's conscious mind while keeping the autonomic functions and motor skills fully operational. The result is a passenger effect in which the victim remains aware but possesses zero control over their actions, even as their body is forced to fire on allies or sabotage equipment. The only reliable defense against this biological takeover is extreme cold. Having evolved in the sweltering subterranean heat of Geonosis, the brainworm's cellular membranes are highly susceptible to thermal shock. Sub-zero temperatures induce immediate paralysis in the parasite, forcing it to relinquish its neural grip. Without this thermal vulnerability, the brainworm would be an unstoppable agent of hive expansion, capable of hollowing out an entire military force from the inside out. Parasitic rule becomes military doctrine when a queen can march the dead through borrowed flesh. This next one is worse for a different reason. It turns pain into part of the protection. The Orbalisk is a rare force-sensitive parasite that transforms into armor. Primarily found on the moon of Duxan, these hard-shelled mollusks are not interested in blood or tissue. They want the specific flavor of a person's connection to the Force. For a Sith Lord, an infestation of Orbalisks is both a crowning achievement and a biological prison. The creatures attach themselves to the skin and begin to multiply rapidly, covering the host in overlapping organic plate mail that defies standard physics. In the Darth Bane trilogy of Legends continuity, the Orbalisk becomes the defining feature of Bane's physical presence. After being attacked by the parasites in a Sith tomb, Bane discovered that the creatures provided him with a nearly perfect defense. An Orbalisk's shell is naturally resistant to lightsaber blades. However, this protection comes at a horrific cost. The Orbalisks are not passive creatures. They inject a constant stream of adrenaline and life-prolonging chemicals into the host to keep them in a perpetual state of agony and fury. The spike in negative emotion generates an enormous feed of dark side energy, which the Orbalisks then consume to fuel their own rapid growth. Once an Orbalisk has latched itself onto a host, it cannot be removed through traditional surgery. If the parasite detects a threat to its attachment, it releases a concentrated dose of neurotoxin into the host's bloodstream. This toxin is so potent that it can kill even a powerful Force user in seconds. Orbalisks also expand until they cover every inch of the body, including the face and joints, threatening to suffocate the host unless they are carefully managed or stunted through specialized Sith alchemy. Protection stops feeling like a gift when the shell on your skin is alive and feeding on your worst impulses. After that comes a hunter that does not need tracks, scent, or open ground to find what it wants. The Vornsker is a canine-like apex predator that has weaponized the Force into a primary sensory organ for tracking prey. This creature exists in a state of constant attunement to the ripples caused by living minds. Native to the planet Merkur, this creature has evolved in a biological arms race against the Ysolamiri, the Force-nullifying lizards. In the Thrawn trilogy from the Legends timeline, the Vornsker was one of the few creatures that can truly unnerve a Jedi. When Luke Skywalker was stranded in the forests of Merkur, he found that his usual methods of stealth were useless. Its unusual adaptation lies in specialized neural architecture. A cluster of Force-sensitive cells within the brain functions like a biological receiver. This organ is tuned specifically to the signatures of Force users, which the Vornsker perceives as a hunger-inducing stimulus. Jedi and Sith have a higher concentration of Force energy, so they shine like beacons to the Predator, often provoking it into a frenzy. Physically, the Vornskr is a sleek, quadrupedal mammal with a whip-like tail. Its coat is dark and coarse, allowing it to blend into the shadows of the olbio trees. However, its most striking feature is its aggression. Unlike most animals that hunt for food, Vornskrs often attack for the sport of the Force chase, even when they're not hungry. This erratic violence made them ideal tools for Grand Admiral Thrawn, who recognized that their instincts could locate Jedi targets otherwise invisible to Imperial sensors. The Vornskr's relationship with its environment is a perfect example of coevolution. Vornskrs are such effective Force trackers that their primary prey, the Ilismiri, evolved the ability to project bubbles of Force neutrality. This creates a dead zone on Myrkr where the Vornskr is essentially blinded if its prey remains within the protective field. On Myrkr, being strong in the Force can make you easier to stalk, not safer. The creature after it goes one step further by removing itself from that entire sensory web. The Tausen is a huge invertebrate that exists as a black hole in the Force, rendering it and anyone near it completely undetectable to psychic senses. While many creatures use camouflage to hide from the eye, the Tausen uses a form of metabiological stealth to hide from the soul. Native to the lightless caverns of the Outer Rim, this giant centipede-like organism has evolved a translucent exoskeleton that refracts both light and Force energy, making it a literal ghost in the machinery of the universe. Dozens of pairs of hooked legs drive the Tausen forward with unsettling speed. Its body is elongated and serpentine, often reaching lengths of over 20 meters. In addition to its Force-shrouding abilities, it is a formidable physical hunter. It produces a thick, adhesive silk from glands near its mandibles, which it uses to ensnare prey in transparent webs. The web is as invisible to the Force as the creature, so Jedi often find themselves entangled in a trap they never felt coming. The Tausen is a walking piece of anti-Force technology. Some organisms do not camouflage their bodies so much as erase their presence from the galaxy's deepest signal. The following creature is impossible to miss: a storm dweller whose scale makes freighters look disposable. The Summa Verminoth is a titanic spacefaring predator that lives in the treacherous maelstrom surrounding Kessel. It has the ability to project lethal mental hallucinations in the minds of Starship crews. As seen in the canon film Solo: A Star Wars Story, the Summa Verminoth doesn't have a traditional skeletal structure. Its body is surrounded by a cloud of electrified gas and debris, which manipulates it using its large tentacles to pull ships towards its central maw. The creature's scale and sudden movement through the storm can overwhelm pilots before they have time to react. Its biology is rooted in the Akkadi's maelstrom itself. It feeds on the intense radiation and energy found within the rift. It does not eat in the traditional sense. It absorbs the raw energy of the maelstrom through its skin. Its tentacles are tipped with specialized suction claws that can crush durasteel hulls, while the limbs themselves function as sensory feelers within the storm, which makes the creature a living navigational hazard. In the maelstrom, the thing reaching for your hull is the only part you can actually see. After that comes a life form that spreads like rot and thinks like a colony. A Drengir pushes a thorny vine through the soft soil, its body expanding like an invasive weed that refuses to die. The creature does not have a heart or a brain in the traditional sense. It is a mass of sentient vegetation that views all meat-based life as spoiled food waiting to be harvested. During the era of the High Republic, the Jedi Order encountered the Drengir as one of the greatest threats to the frontier. These plant-based monsters were originally trapped in stasis by the ancient Sith, but they were inadvertently awakened, leading to an infestation that threatened entire star systems. Unlike a simple beast, the Drengir act with collective hunger, leaving lush worlds into gray, thorny graveyards. They sit on the razor's edge between a mindless fungus and an evil intelligence. The Drengir is a chaotic tangle of roots, thorns, and hidden mouths. They have a central root mind but can move through individual pods that sprout from the ground. Their skin is a thick, bark-like hide that is highly resistant to lightsabers and blaster fire. Cutting a Drengir often just results in two separate pieces of the plant growing back into two separate creatures. They communicate through a shared consciousness that allows them to coordinate attacks across a battlefield, using vine limbs to trap and pull victims into the dark, thorny mass of their central bodies. The Drengir's ability to corrupt other life forms makes them especially difficult to contain. They can extend mind vines that tap into the nervous systems of other creatures. forcing them to do the Hive's bidding. To the Drengir, the galaxy is a garden that has grown out of control, and they are the gardeners who come to prune the meat from the stars. They are nearly impossible to eradicate because even a single surviving seed can restart an infestation. For the Jedi of the High Republic, fighting them was not a war of blasters, but a struggle against an unstoppable biological rot that viewed the entire galaxy as a meal. A world can stop feeling habitable once those roots take hold. The next creature is gentler, but no less unsettling, because it crossed the stars before anyone built an engine. The Purrgil is a massive, semi-sentient spacefaring creature that bridges the gap between biological life and interstellar travel. Resembling a cross between a whale and a cephalopod, these behemoths thrive in the vacuum of space, using their large fins and 4 powerful tentacles to maneuver through the stars. While most lifeforms require pressurized hulls and life support, the Purrgil's physiology is evolved for the void. Their most distinctive adaptation is their diet. They consume Clauson-36, a rare gas found in planetary nebulae. This gas reacts within specialized internal organs to generate the energy required for natural hyperspace travel, a process called simu-tunneling. In the canon animated series Star Wars Rebels, the Purrgil proved their intelligence when Ezra Bridger used a force bond to coordinate a pod of them against the Imperial 7th Fleet. By wrapping their tentacles around Star Destroyers, they dragged entire vessels into hyperspace. This suggests they do not merely blink through space, but have a sophisticated understanding of hyperspace lanes. In fact, many historians believe that the earliest sentient species developed hyperdrive technology by studying Purrgil migration patterns, mapping the galaxy's highways based on where these massive creatures naturally travel to feed. Despite their size, Purrgil are generally peaceful unless provoked or interrupted during their feeding cycles. Their bodies are covered in a thick, leathery hide that can withstand the radiation of deep space, and their eyes glow with a soft bioluminescence that helps them navigate dark nebulae. However, they are a notorious hazard to commercial shipping. Their tendency to drift into established hyperspace lanes has caused countless collisions. To the average pirate, they are a pest. To the Jedi, they are a profound example of how the Force binds all life, even in the cold reaches of the vacuum. Living bodies can do what Navi computers do, and they do it by instinct. What follows presence drops all softness and wonder. It arrives like a fault in reality itself. The Star Weird is a semi-corporeal manifestation of pure malevolence that haunts the vacuum of deep space and derelict vessels. Described in Legends material as space ghosts, these entities are non-sentient but highly predatory. Physically, they appear as tall, gaunt humanoids with skeletal features, elongated talons, and white hair that drifts as if submerged in water. Their defining trait is selective intangibility. A Star Weird exists partially out of phase with normal reality, allowing blaster bolts and physical strikes to pass through its form without causing damage. The most terrifying aspect of a Star Weird is its psychic scream. Because sound cannot travel in a vacuum, the entity projects a telepathic shriek directly into the minds of its prey. This scream is not just a sound, but a mental assault that induces paralyzing dread. It can cause immediate physiological collapse or cardiac arrest in non-Force sensitives. However, Star Weirds reserve a unique, instinctual hatred for those who can touch the Force. One will often ignore a ship's entire crew to focus exclusively on a Jedi or a Sith, entering a state of hyper-aggressive frenzy until the Force-sensitive individual is neutralized. The origin of these creatures remains a mystery. Some xenotheorists suggest they are glitches in the Force, while others believe they are remnants of ancient dark side experiments. They do not eat, breathe, or sleep. They only drift through the void, waiting for the presence of a sentient mind to trigger their hunting instinct. Encountering a Star Weird is often a death sentence for spacers. By the time the sudden chilling ringing begins in their minds, the entity has already phased through the hull, ready to tear through both flesh and spirit. Deep space turns malignant when a thing can ignore your hull and scream straight into your mind. Only one familiar creature sits above it, because small size means nothing when biology can shut the Force off. The Ysolmiri is a small, furry lizard native to the trees of the planet Merkur, possessing a biological adaptation that defies the laws of the galaxy. Unlike almost every other living thing, the Ysolmiri does not just exist within the Force, it repels it. To survive the predatory Vornskurs, which hunt by sensing the Force signatures of their prey, the Ysolmiri evolved the ability to project a Force-neutral bubble. Within this radius, the Force simply ceases to function. This makes the creature one of the most effective biological defenses against Force users, as it effectively severs their connection to the cosmic energy field. Grand Admiral Thrawn famously weaponized this biology during his campaign against the New Republic. By mounting Ysalmiri on specialized nutrient frames, he could carry the creatures into battle, creating a mobile dead zone that rendered Jedi like Luke Skywalker powerless. In a large enough group, multiple Ysalmiri can overlap their bubbles to create massive voids in the Force spanning several kilometers. For a Jedi, entering this field is a traumatic experience described as a sudden crushing sensory deprivation, leaving them physically vulnerable and mentally disoriented. The strangeness of the Ysalmiri's metabolism is so extreme that it actually pushes back against the Force. More than a simple mental block, it is a physical displacement of the Force's presence. Because they are sedentary and spend their lives firmly anchored to the mineral-rich bark of Murker's trees, they are difficult to remove without killing them. However, their utility as a tactical asset makes them one of the most dangerous non-predatory animals in existence. In a galaxy governed by mystical energy, the most powerful creature is the one that can make that energy vanish. A branch on Murker can become a dead zone for the most powerful mystics in the galaxy, and even that defense looks gentle beside what comes next, because the final predator doesn't silence the Force, it eats it. Introduced in the High Republic era, the Nameless are the apex predators of the Jedi Order. Also known as the Shri Karai, or Eaters of the Force, these pale, multi-limbed horrors do not hunt for meat. They feed exclusively on the Force energy within living beings. When a Nameless enters the vicinity of a Force sensitive, it projects an aura of pure, unadulterated terror that causes the victim's connection to the Force to fracture. This results in horrific hallucinations and the loss of all Force-derived abilities, leaving even the most powerful Jedi Masters cowering and helpless. The feeding process is hellish. As the creature consumes the victim's inner light, the host undergoes a rapid calcification process. Once the Force energy is completely drained, the victim is reduced to a brittle, gray husk, a statue of ash that crumbles into dust at the slightest touch. There is no known biological defense against this consumption. The Nameless are eyeless and appear to see the galaxy through the vibrations and signatures of the Force itself, making them impossible to hide from for anyone with even a slight Force sensitivity. The Nameless become even more unsettling because of their origin and their relationship to the dark side. While they appear monstrous, they are not necessarily evil in a moral sense. They are a natural check on the Force, existing as a void that must be filled. They were used by the Nihil Marauders to devastating effect, nearly breaking the Jedi Order during its golden age. The discovery of the Nameless shattered the Jedi's perception of themselves as invincible guardians. The very power they relied upon was exactly what made them the perfect prey. Biology shaped those creatures, and so did the worlds that made them. But the galaxy's most feared predators are not always animals. On one desert planet, the ones the settlers dread most walk upright and raise families of their own.
The Tusken Raiders have been attacking settlements on Tatooine for generations since the first colonists arrived, yet no one understands why they fight. When Anakin Skywalker found his mother dying in a Tusken camp after being held captive for an entire month, he made the same mistake everyone makes. He assumed they harmed her because they are savages. However, the truth is far worse than simple savagery. What happened to Shmi was not random brutality, it was an instruction, and Canon and Legends sources reveal the system that made it necessary. The first dark truth. Pain is how Tuskens teach obedience and worth. In canon continuity, when Boba Fett undergoes combat training with a Tusken tribe in the Book of Boba Fett Season 1, Episode 2, The Tribes of Tatooine, the method is revealing. A Tusken warrior repeatedly knocks the Gadurfi stick from Fett's hands during practice sessions. The training is harsh and repetitive, with no theory taught, no progression from safe drills to full contact, and no verbal explanation of technique. Fett learns by experiencing pain and adjusting until he can disarm his opponents, not by understanding concepts or receiving instruction. This is not unique to outsiders learning Tusken ways. In fact, Luke Skywalker's encounter with Tusken Raiders in the 1997 film A New Hope follows the same pattern. A Tusken brings down his curved, double-pointed Gadurfi blade, knocking Luke unconscious. The weapon is described as the dreaded axe blade that has struck terror in the hearts of local settlers, with its curved double points designed to maximize both visible threat and physical damage. Beyond their own people, this teaching method extends to captives. When Tusken Raiders take Shmi Skywalker, they hold her for an entire month and subject her to daily hardship. In the Legends continuity, the Attack of the Clones novelization by R.A. Salvatore reveals that this was more than simple captivity, but the Tusken way of measuring their enemies. From the nods and the tone of their voices during her captivity, she realized that her resilience had impressed them. The month-long ordeal served as an evaluation, with her ability to endure determining her worth in their eyes. Even cultural education operates through the same system. According to another Legends source, The Essential Guide to Alien Species, Tusken storytellers preserve tribal history through perfect memorization, with apprentices learning every tale of each lineage. However, if the apprentice makes a mistake, they are executed outright, because such an error is considered blasphemy. Once a storyteller gives an account for the first time, not one word is permitted to change from that time forward. The cultural knowledge that defines Tusken identity is taught through the threat of death, with perfection required or execution delivered. What becomes clear from combat training, weapon design, captivity, and cultural education is that in Tusken culture, pain is not a tool for achieving other goals, but the goal itself. This creates a teaching system where pain proves who has value. In canon continuity, when Cobb Vanth recounts his history with Tusken Raiders in The Mandalorian Season 2, Episode 1, The Marshal, he states they attacked his settlement less than a year ago and killed half a dozen people at the mining camp. His response was violent retaliation, in which he took down about twice as many Tuskens. Despite a 2-to-1 casualty ratio in the settlers' favor, the conflict continues. Neither side treats violence as a signal to stop or negotiate. Both sides treat violence as the only form of communication that matters. The fighting itself has become the relationship, rather than a breakdown of the relationship. The Tusken approach to teaching through force creates individuals who understand power only through physical proof. Warriors who have learned nothing but combat make effective raiders, but they require strict control systems to maintain tribal unity. However, this is where Tusken identity construction becomes critical. Creating warriors requires more than combat training. It requires removing any competing loyalty that might pull individuals away from the tribe. That removal starts with making sure no Tusken can be recognized as separate from any other. The second dark truth: masks and anonymity eliminate personal identity. Tusken identity is built through the erasure of individuality, and this begins with what they wear. During Boba Fett's initiation ceremony, the Tusken clothe him with Tusken robes, scarves, and bandages. Every initiate receives the same wrappings, the same masks, the same coverings, with no room for personal expression. The uniformity extends beyond simple tradition. In a legend source, Kenobi by John Jackson Miller establishes that seeing another's face was grounds for a duel to the death, with exceptions only for parents, spouses, and children under 16. A Tusken who looks upon another's face outside these permitted relationships must fight to the death. The erasure extends deeper than physical covering. No individual Tusken in any canon source is given a personal name. They are identified exclusively by role or age. The Chief, a young Tusken youth; an older Tusken, a Tusken sentry, the Tusken chieftain. Ben Kenobi lived on Tatooine for decades. He understands Tusken language, can recognize their tracks, and knows their territorial patterns. Yet, he still refers to them collectively as the Sand People, or Tusken Raiders, stating they speak in a coarse, barbaric language, but never mentioning individual names or identifiers beyond tribal affiliation. Either Tuskens do not use personal names at all, or they keep them completely internal to their culture, never revealing them even during extended contact with outsiders like Fett, who live among them. The linguistic standardization reinforces this uniformity. All Tusken communicate in the same Tusken language, with no regional variations noted. Din Djarin uses the same language and sign system with tribes across different regions of Tatooine, preventing the formation of distinct regional identities that might compete with tribal loyalty. Individual achievement is recorded only as tribal action, making personal accomplishment impossible outside collective identity. This becomes visible during the Krayt Dragon Hunt. Every action is attributed collectively. The Tuskens fire their ballistae. The Tuskens and settlers try to drag out the beast. No individual Tusken is distinguished by specific actions, with the collective performing, the collective receiving credit, and personal distinction remaining structurally impossible. The anonymity serves a function beyond simple collectivism. It prevents an individual's reputation from competing with tribal authority. The chief maintains authority through position, not achievement. Challengers cannot build reputations because reputation itself cannot exist, preventing individual power accumulation that might fracture tribal unity. This erasure of individual identity creates warriors who understand themselves only as extensions of the tribe. However, warriors require more than identity uniformity and combat training. They require spiritual justification for violence that transforms killing from sin into sacred duty. That justification comes from a religion built entirely around bloodshed. The third dark truth. Tusken spirituality depends on sacrifice and ongoing combat. Tusken religious practices integrate warfare directly into ceremonial life. When the Tusken chief gives Boba Fett a gecko for his vision quest, he explains that Fett must swallow the lizard, which will guide him from inside his head. The hallucinogenic experience is mandatory, with Fett experiencing visions of trees and oceans and creatures with red eyes, along with flashbacks to his escape from the Sarlacc that connect past trauma to present spiritual transformation. The vision quest is not abstract spiritual enlightenment, but has an immediate practical purpose, identifying the material for weapon creation. Fett returns with a branch to craft his Gadurfi stick. After completing the weapon, the tribe gathers as he parries with the other Tusken Raiders before a campfire, dancing around the flames in celebration of the newly created weapon. The spiritual journey's purpose was to produce a warrior through a revealing sequence. Trauma recall through forced hallucination, weapon creation, ceremonial combat, and religious dance. The spiritual transformation cannot occur without these combat elements, meaning a Tusken who experienced peaceful visions and returned empty-handed would fail initiation. Combat is not something that happens to Tuskens and requires religious explanation. Combat is what Tusken religion produces. Funeral rites follow the same pattern. After Pike Gunners kill a Bantha and several Tusken Raiders, the tribe holds a cremation that same night, with Fett himself carrying the remains of a young Tusken youth whose parents fling his remains over a fire. There is no mourning period, just death during the day and cremation that night, with the dead honored by burning them quickly and returning to the activities that caused their death. This rapid cycling through grief creates warriors who cannot afford emotional attachment. When loss is ritualized to occur within hours rather than processed over weeks, the emotional impact must be minimized, or accumulated grief would destroy the warriors psychologically. War cries operate on the same principle. During the Krayt Dragon Hunt, 3 Tuskens approach the cave and make war cries that awaken the dragon, serving both as a tactical positioning tool and a ceremonial announcement that transforms the hunt into a spiritual practice. The integration of combat into spiritual life means Tuskens cannot practice their religion without fighting. Initiation requires hallucinogenic visions leading to weapon creation. Funeral rites transition immediately back to warfare, and war cries that summon danger are ceremonial acts. A Tusken who refuses combat cannot complete initiation, honor the dead, or participate in sacred challenges, making peace equivalent to heresy. Warriors who have been trained through combat, stripped of individual identity, and religiously commanded to fight need a mechanism to absorb outsiders. A culture built on warfare must transform enemies into members or face extinction from constant losses. The solution is not to kill outsiders, but to remake them entirely. The fourth dark truth. Outsiders are absorbed to grow tribal strength through forced cultural assimilation. Tusken assimilation is not limited to occasional captives. According to the legend source Kenobi, the Tusken Raiders often replenish their numbers by taking outsiders into their families, with one character noting that a human sister had joined their family years ago through this practice. The absorption of outsiders is created as standard recruitment rather than a rare occurrence, revealing a systematic approach to maintaining the tribal population through cultural assimilation. The completeness of this transformation is visible in Din Djarin. He speaks to Banthas in Tusken, communicates using their sign system, and negotiates complex agreements like the Krayt Dragon cooperation that requires understanding Tusken honor codes. his integration is so complete that he can represent Tusken interests to settlers and settler interests to Tuskens, functioning as a bridge between cultures while remaining loyal to Tusken values. After Boba Fett helps stop hover train attacks, the Chief calls him a good guide, meaning someone who could lead effective raids and train warriors in new combat techniques. The approval comes from successfully adopting Tusken values, with outsiders measured by their contribution to tribal warfare capacity. The assimilation process is unidirectional. Tuskens do not adopt settler customs or technologies beyond what serves warfare. They adopt speeder bikes only after Fett trains them to use these vehicles for raiding. Outsiders become Tusken, or they remain enemies. This ability to transform outsiders into Tuskens strengthens the tribe. However, forcing enemies to become members does not explain why the fighting never stops. That requires understanding how Tusken justice operates. When one Tusken commits an act, every Tusken becomes responsible. The fifth dark truth. Tusken justice punishes groups, not individuals. Tuskens make no distinction between individual settlers. According to the Essential Guide to Alien Species, Sand People are inherently angered by the presence in their territories of off-world settlers, and will often attack moisture farmers and settlers without provocation, targeting them simply for belonging to the settler category. The Attack of the Clones Visual Dictionary notes that Sand People are reputed to slay anyone foolish enough to come near their sacred wells, killing anyone who approaches, regardless of their individual identity or intentions. A settler who just arrived on Tatooine faces the same treatment as one whose family has occupied Tusken territory for generations. The dark truth is not that Tuskens alone think this way, it's that settlers mirror the exact same logic. The Attack of the Clones Visual Dictionary characterizes all Tatooine's native Tusken raiders as violent enemies of the moisture farmers, with no distinction made between tribes or individuals. Klieg Lars demonstrates this when describing the group that took Shmi, saying those Tusken walk like men, but they're vicious, mindless monsters. Both groups operate on identical collective threat frameworks where individual identity becomes irrelevant and group membership determines guilt. This makes resolution structurally impossible because neither side can negotiate with individuals when individuals don't exist in their system of justice. However, collective guilt alone does not explain why territorial conflicts never end. That requires understanding how Tusken territorial claims operate. The sixth dark truth. Tusken culture relies on conflict to persist. Tusken territoriality operates without legal recognition, creating permanent conflict with anyone attempting to use Tatooine's desert regions. Moisture farmers establish farms without negotiating with Tusken tribes, and the Tusken respond with raids that enforce their claims through force rather than contracts. The hover train attacks demonstrate systematic escalation of this approach. The Pike Syndicate runs hover train routes across Tatooine's desert that cross territory Tuskens claim through traditional use. The Tuskens respond with systematic ambush, attacking frequently enough that the Pikes allocate gunners specifically to defend the trains and turn routine transport into armed convoy operations. Neither side recognizes the other's claim as legitimate, and the absence of legal frameworks means every territorial dispute becomes another fight. This creates perpetual low-intensity warfare that cannot be resolved through negotiation. When Obi-Wan rescues Luke, he mimics a krayt dragon call that scares off the Tusken attackers, who assume a krayt dragon is nearby and retreat immediately. However, the Tuskens return to the same territories afterward, with the threat creating only temporary displacement rather than permanent abandonment. Even overwhelming force produces tactical retreat, never strategic surrender. Territorial defense intensifies when resources are involved. As revealed in a legend source, The Secrets of Tatooine, Tusken tribes tightly guarded their secret desert oases, the main source of their food, defending them through force against any approach. The oases produce hubba-gourds, difficult-to-digest fruit that Tuskens subsist on, with dietary dependence on a single resource at specific locations, creating structural incentive for territorial conflict. A tribe losing control of its oasis loses its food supply, making compromise impossible. This creates a self-reinforcing cycle where every element depends on the others. Environmental scarcity drives territorial conflict, which reinforces cultural emphasis on combat, which produces warriors trained from childhood to respond to challenges with force, which increases casualties, which requires rapid cremation and immediate return to fighting. The cycle cannot break because removing any single element would collapse the entire system. But the cycle requires one final element to sustain itself. Suffering cannot simply be endured, it must be transformed into sacred validation. The seventh dark truth. Atrocities become sacred validation through trauma ritualization. Tusken culture turns trauma into a social structure. Personal suffering reinforces their way of life rather than questioning it. This is most visible in their relationship with banthas. According to the legend source Star Wars Complete Encyclopedia, Tusken Raiders and their bantha mounts share an almost symbiotic relationship, meaning they are deeply connected like two species that cannot survive without each other. The relationship goes beyond practical use. Marriage ceremonies involve both Tusken partners and their banthas, creating a four-way bond. When a Tusken passes away, their bantha goes into a frenzy that usually kills the creature, and the bantha is turned loose in the desert rather than given to another Tusken. This wastes a valuable resource in a resource-scarce environment. The tribe sacrifices its survival capability to honor the bond. The inverse creates social death for the Tusken. The encyclopedia notes that a member who lost his bantha was considered incomplete and an outcast among his people, with no way to restore their status. The trauma becomes a permanent identity marker. The ritualization of suffering begins even earlier. The book notes that babies often perish because of the difficult desert life, and Sand people take great pride in knowing that only the strongest survive. Infant death, which most cultures grieve as a tragedy, becomes a source of pride in Tusken society. The loss of children is reframed from a devastating loss into proof of evolutionary strength. Personal suffering becomes rigid social classifications that pass trauma across generations. The environmental trauma follows the same ritualization. During sandstorm season, clans hold themselves up in the needles according to Secrets of Tatooine, and many gruesome legends surrounded Tusken Raiders during this period. The legends describe clans fighting over limited resources during sandstorms. Rather than teaching cooperation or planning, these stories teach that only the strong survive. As a result, the next generation repeats the same behavior. The coming-of-age rituals make this trauma conversion official. In Legends continuity, the source documents that Tuskens pursued rigorous rites of passage, such as hunting the deadly crate dragons to become adults. These are the same creatures whose calls cause Tuskens to retreat immediately, the same creatures that represent overwhelming power that Tuskens cannot safely handle. Yet, young Tuskens must face these predators as a rite of passage. The near-death experience is required for adult status. The terror of facing an enemy that can easily kill you becomes the necessary transformation into adult membership. The culture cannot produce adults without putting children in mortal danger. A Tusken who refuses the crate dragon hunt remains a child forever in social status, regardless of physical age. The fate of those who fail is even more revealing. If they do not return from their trial, no word is mentioned of them again. Those who do not survive during the crate dragon hunt are removed completely from tribal memory, treated as if they had never existed. The trauma of losing children to these deadly rituals is not processed through mourning, but through erasure, with failed youth disappearing from both conversation and collective history. However, the trauma system that creates fearless warriors also creates unexpected weaknesses. The ritualization of trauma creates not only cultural rigidity, but also physical vulnerability. The encyclopedia notes that the Sand people were easily intoxicated by simple sugar water, literally just water with sugar dissolved in it. This basic drink that most species consume without issue reveals how their isolation created exploitable weaknesses. The same system that makes them effective warriors makes them vulnerable to simple substances. The Tusken Raiders built a culture where every element reinforces the same goal, producing warriors who cannot imagine peace. The desert does not care about morality, it only cares about what survives. The Tuskens survived by making suffering into structure, by turning every trauma into another reason the system must continue. What began as a harsh adaptation became a systematic design. The design became culture. Now, Centuries later, the system functions so completely that peace would threaten the species itself.
The Tuskens turned their pain into a system, and it kept them alive, but suffering with nothing to contain it becomes something far worse. Thousands of years earlier, one soldier walked off a battlefield as something that no longer counted as a man.
We don't know much about Nihilus before Malachor V, but we do know he was a human male who served in the Mandalorian Wars, fighting alongside Revan's forces against the Neo-Crusaders. For years, he fought in the war, losing everything in the fighting: his family, his friends, even his will to live. But at Malachor V, as he stood on the planet's surface during the final battle, everything went terribly wrong. The moment had finally come to end the war, and when General Mitra Surik gave the order to activate Revan's secret weapon, he felt something terrible wake up in the Force. A wave of fear washed over him as the mass shadow generator created a huge gravity trap that crushed Malachor V's orbiting fleets in an instant. The ground shook hard beneath him as the planet itself began to crack, and his fellow soldiers died instantly, crushed by the debris or eaten by the dark energies set free. But something different happened to him, something that would change the entire galaxy. Nihilus survived when others died, becoming a wound in the Force, a void of emptiness. Acting without thinking, he drained the life force of a dying soldier nearby to keep himself from falling apart. This act briefly stopped his pain but left him forever wanting more. From that moment, Nihilus's ties to normal feelings were cut. He only felt an endless hunger, not sadness or guilt for the lives he took. He found out that he could survive only by eating the Force energy of other living beings, and with each life he ate, his hunger grew back even stronger. Nihilus's body, already kept alive only by the dark side, began to waste away. Over time, he would lose his physical form completely. Each feeding gave him a short break, but left him even weaker if he went without food, creating a terrible cycle of endless starvation. After the battle, he stayed trapped in the wreckage on Malachor V's destroyed surface, basically stuck among the ruins. Soon, he needed more life force each day just to keep his dying body together, and even while actively draining whatever life was nearby, the emptiness inside kept growing larger. Over time, the dark side's poison ate away at his body until nothing of his original form was left. This faceless ghost would later be named Darth Nihilus by Darth Traya. But at that time, he was simply a being of hunger and dark force energy. The Sith Triumvirate. After the Jedi Civil War, the fallen Jedi Kreia, now Darth Traya, found this wound in the Force on Malachor V and saw potential in it. She took Nihilus to the Trayus Academy and became his Sith Master, teaching him to focus and use his hunger as a weapon on purpose rather than let it eat him up without control. Under Traya's training, Nihilus's feeding ability became far more controlled and powerful. He learned to feel the life force of faraway Force-sensitive beings and even drain whole populations across space through the Force. This made him a perfect Jedi hunter in the years to come. Under Traya's teaching, Nihilus accepted his role as what she would call the Lord of Hunger. He got better at his ability to feed on the Force, learning to control the process so he could adjust his feeding as needed. Even better, he learned to feel distant Force presences and drain life across the huge distances of space. This ability would make him the perfect hunter of Jedi. Kreia gave him the Sith name Darth Nihilus, a name meaning nothingness to match the emptiness he represented. From then on, he was known as Lord of Hunger, no longer a man, but a living void driven only by the need to feed. In fact, Kreia later said that Nihilus's presence alone could kill. His mere presence kills those around him. Spending too much time near the Lord of Hunger turned his Sith followers into dried-up slaves barely holding on to life, showing how even standing in Nihilus's shadow was dangerous. As Nihilus lost what made him human, he stopped speaking in any normal human language. Instead, when he made sounds, an inhuman hollow voice came out, one that literally carried his hunger with it. Hearing this terrible voice was painful. In fact, Nihilus's very speech could cause pain or death to anyone who heard it. Eventually, Nihilus's real body rotted away completely, and to avoid losing his existence to the void, he tied his life force to his mask, armor, and robes through Sith magic. These items became containers for his spirit. Without them, his essence would disappear into nothing. Therefore, the armor and mask were not just clothes. They were Nihilus. Nihilus soon joined with Traya and another of her students, Darth Sion, the so-called Lord of Pain who could not die, to form a secret Sith triumvirate. Their shared goal was to wipe out the Jedi Order, though each Dark Lord was broken in a different way. Traya, having been thrown out and feeling betrayed by the Force, wanted the complete end of the Force itself. Sion's undead existence was kept going by pain and hatred, and Nihilus was a bottomless pit of hunger that would eat all life if nobody stopped him. By combining their strengths, they planned to finish what Darth Revan and Malak had started, to wipe out the last Jedi in the galaxy. In practice, the Triumvirate's methods worked well together. Sion's Sith assassins hunted and murdered lone Jedi in hiding, while Nihilus worked as a living doomsday weapon. If the Jedi tried to gather or rebuild, he would feel that concentration of life in the Force and eat the entire gathering at once. This meant any world hosting a Jedi meeting became Nihilus's target for destruction. The surviving Jedi learned that even being in the same place was dangerous, forcing them to stay scattered and hidden. Alone, they were far easier targets for Sion's agents. But the alliance didn't last. In 3955 BBY, Nihilus and Sion got tired of Traya's leadership. They attacked their master in the Trayus core. Nihilus slammed her against the platform with the Force, and Sion beat her until she couldn't fight back anymore. Together, the two Sith drained Traya's connection to the Force, cutting off her abilities. Darth Traya was defeated and thrown out, left for dead by her backstabbing students. Thrown out and weakened, Kreia came to sadly realize what Nihilus truly was, a monster born of Malachor that, without guidance, could eat everything without caring. No longer controlled by her influence, Nihilus was not a precise weapon, but a wild force of nature beyond control. In exile, Kreia began to plan a way to destroy the creature she had helped create. She expected that the Jedi exile, Mitra Surik, who had accidentally played a part in Nihilus's creation at Malachor 5, would one day return from the Outer Rim. Kreia quietly set up Surik as the answer to Nihilus, believing this wound in the Force could face the Lord of Hunger when the time came. Without Traya's influence, Nihilus existed only to feed. He had no big plan or final goal beyond the next meal. With each feeding, his power grew. But so too did his hunger, doubling after each feeding. He was already dead in every way that mattered. The only question was how many he would kill before he finally fell apart. The consumption of Katar. In 3952 BBY, Jedi Master Atris came up with a plan, one that sadly became the Jedi Order's biggest disaster. She secretly called the surviving Jedi Masters to a meeting on the Miraluka colony world of Katar, planning to use their gathering as bait to draw out the hidden Sith threat. Atris herself stayed behind on Telos 4, hiding her absence but quietly spreading word of this Jedi meeting in hopes the Sith would take the bait. She promised the others that if the Sith showed themselves, they could be faced and destroyed. Unfortunately, Atris badly underestimated the power hiding in the shadows. She believed the secret meeting on the Miraluka colony would lure the Sith into a trap she could spring. She promised the remaining Jedi Masters that when the Sith came, they would be ready to strike back. But what she didn't understand was how powerful Nihilus had become. Her trap would work, though not in the way she planned. Drawn by this bright light in the Force, Nihilus felt the Katar gathering like a burning beacon calling out to his hunger. He immediately set course for Katar aboard his scary flagship, the Ravager. The Ravager was a wrecked Republic capital ship from Malachor 5, a vessel that should have been destroyed. Its hull was cracked and open to space in places. Basically a dead ship kept alive only by Nihilus's power. With this ghost ship and his fleet of Sith leftovers, Nihilus arrived at Katar to feed. The Dark Lord stood on his bridge and let loose his power upon the planet. He sent out a huge wave of Force energy downwards, an invisible storm that touched every living thing below. When Nihilus was close enough, he spoke a terrible spell, his very voice filled with hunger, and that sound echoed across Katar, destroying life as it spread. In an instant, Jedi Master Vandar Tokari and the entire group of Jedi at the meeting fell as their life energy was ripped away. Decades of training made no difference. In just seconds, every living thing on the planet was completely eaten. The Miraluka colonists, being naturally Force-sensitive, saw their coming doom through the Force. The entire civilization died in moments, their foresight giving them a brief, terrible awareness of the nothing that swallowed them. Cities full of life seconds earlier had fallen quiet, turned into mass graveyards under a now empty sky. The surface of Katar was cleaned of all life, turned into lifeless rock and dust. Back on Telos, Atris, who had purposely stayed away from the meeting, felt the shock of those countless deaths through the Force. Only afterward did she fully understand how huge her mistake was. Yes, her trap had drawn out the hidden Sith, but at a terrible price. The gathered Jedi were destroyed, and an entire Miraluka colony was destroyed. Atris had tried to save the Jedi Order by finding its enemies. Instead, her actions almost finished the Jedi Order. Among the destruction, one person survived, a Miraluka woman named Visas Mar. Nihilus found the badly hurt Visas on the surface, and instead of killing her, he knocked her out and brought her aboard his ship. When Visas woke up days later, fully healed on the Ravager, Nihilus silently invaded her mind and showed her a vision of the galaxy through his eyes. In this vision, Visas saw a galaxy where all beings were stripped of the Force, disconnected from one another, and lost in chaos. Nihilus saw himself bringing order to this chaos by eating all life. This terrible sight destroyed her Force vision, literally burning her blind eyes and cutting off her view of anything except Nihilus. In that moment, Visas gave in completely to the being who had killed everyone on her world. Broken by the loss and the dark vision, she became Nihilus's obedient servant, his shadow hand, completely under his control and without hope. Katar's destruction basically erased the Miraluka presence there, an entire Force-sensitive culture. After this terrible act, Visas Mar became Darth Nihilus's shadow hand, tied to him by a powerful Force bond. Through this bond, created in the vision that broke her, she could feel her master's hunger and pain, and she served him completely, even helping and looking for new feeding grounds when he asked. It was only much later, after the Jedi exile Mitra Surik spared Visas' life and showed her kindness, that Visas woke up to regret. Under Surik's guidance, she turned against Nihilus and began to hate what she had done in his name. But that lay in the future. The Lord of Hunger Ascendant. Having eaten Katar, Nihilus had gone beyond any normal Sith goal. Politics or revenge didn't interest him. He existed only to satisfy his endless hunger. Even other Sith stayed away from him, knowing that Nihilus would just as easily eat allies as enemies. In the following years, the Lord of Hunger wandered the Outer Rim aboard the Ravager. Followed by a fleet of wrecked warships, he kept going through the dark side. He searched for worlds rich in the Force to eat, and whispers spread of a terrifying Sith Lord who could eat entire planets. The truth of Nihilus's rampage was even more horrible than the rumors. With each feeding, his power and hunger only grew, leaving whole systems lifeless behind him. During this time, Nihilus wandered the Outer Rim with his fleet, searching for worlds strong in Force energy to feed his hunger. Stories of his destruction spread through the galaxy like wildfire, and whispers of a Sith Lord who could eat entire worlds became the stuff of nightmares. But the reality was far worse than any story could describe. Aboard the Ravager, Nihilus's presence had destroyed his own crew. The warship, still cracked and half-ruined from Malachor V, worked only through Nihilus's dark will and a skeleton crew of followers enslaved by his power. Whole sections of the ship were open to space, useless except to corpses and mindless shells. Those sent to serve Nihilus quickly lost their minds and strength, turned into slaves that walked through the ship doing simple tasks, barely alive. The hallways of the Ravager were filled with the proof of Nihilus's hungry nature, each crew member showing the slow death that waited for anyone who stayed near the Dark Lord too long. During this time, Visas Mar acted as Nihilus's agent and messenger. As the one person connected to his mind, she managed tasks aboard the Ravager and helped carry out his will, even looking for important Force echoes or targets for him to feed upon. Tied to Nihilus by the Force, Visas could feel the beating of his hunger within her own mind. She felt that every moment for him was torture, his existence a pain of endless need that only eating life could briefly calm. By now, nothing of the person he once was seemed to remain. Nihilus worked by pure instinct, driven by need rather than thinking. When she looked at her master through the Force, she saw only an all-eating void. Around 3951 BBY, Nihilus's influence spread into the Onderon Civil War. His Sith forces secretly backed General Vaklu's rebels in their attempt to overthrow Queen Talia. Nihilus's agent, Colonel Tobin, Vaklu's second-in-command, acted as the go-between for this partnership. Their goal was to cut Onderon's ties to the Republic, which included getting rid of Queen Talia's Jedi advisor, Master Kavar, one of the last Jedi Masters. Nihilus's followers even set up a camp in the Forbidden Tomb of Frieden Nad on Dixun. There, the Sith performed dark rituals, trying to strengthen Vaklu's rebellion by drawing on the tomb's dark side power and therefore tip Onderon's fate in Nihilus's favor. In early 3951 BBY, Nihilus felt something wrong in the Force, an echo strangely familiar to his own, yet not the same. Unable to understand it, he sent Visas Mar to investigate and get rid of its source. That source was Mitra Surik, the Jedi exile, who had just returned from exile and unknowingly gave off a wound in the Force like Nihilus. Visas found Surik's ship and attacked, trying to capture or kill her as ordered, but Surik defeated Visas in the following fight. Yet instead of killing the Miraluka, Mitra Surik chose mercy, sparing Visas' life and even treating her injuries. This unexpected kindness shook Visas deeply. Nihilus's slave found herself shown kindness for the first time since Qatar, creating the hope that she could escape the darkness she was tied to. Visas' betrayal had begun, and that spark of freedom would prove important in the trials to come. After Vaklu's defeat, Colonel Tobin, hurt and desperate, ran to Darth Nihilus. Taking Krea's trick, Tobin told Nihilus that a secret academy of Jedi was gathered on Telos 4, unknowingly delivering the bait Krea had planned. This false rumor of many Jedi on Telos instantly caught Nihilus's attention. The bait was set, and Nihilus moved to feed. By this stage, Darth Sion himself stayed away from Nihilus. He knew too well that Nihilus's careless hunger could just as easily eat a Sith ally as any Jedi. In truth, the Sith triumvirate had broken apart in all but name. Sion continued his campaign of terror with elite assassins, picking off Jedi survivors one by one, while Nihilus searched the stars for entire worlds to eat. The two Sith Lords rarely talked now, each following their own path. What remained of the triumvirate was simply two dark beings with different methods of reaching the same dark goal. Without Treya's influence, Nihilus existed only to feed. He had no big plan or final goal beyond the next meal. With each feeding, his power grew, but so too did his hunger, becoming harder to satisfy after every feeding. By 3951 BBY, only a handful of Jedi were even left alive. Masters like Zez Kaiel, Vrook Lamar, Kavar, and Atris, who had not gone to Qatar, were among the few survivors, and they stayed in hiding. Basically, the galaxy had no real defense against the Lord of Hunger. No Jedi could gather to challenge him without becoming his next meal. The Trap at Telos. Mitra Surik, the Jedi exile, had returned to known space by 3951 BBY. Without knowing it, she was special in a strange way. Like Nihilus, Mitra was a wound in the Force, formed at Malachor 5. Yet her condition was the complete opposite of Nihilus's. Where Nihilus's wound made him always drain life, Mitra's wound showed up as nothing, an empty spot in the Force. She survived Malachor 5 by cutting her connection to the Force, making herself empty to its touch. This meant that where Nihilus always ate life to survive, Mitra Surik was an empty space that could not be eaten or filled. In simple terms, the exile's very nature made her the perfect weapon against the Lord of Hunger. This Telos trap was the final piece of Krea's long game. By using Colonel Tobin's false report, Krea tricked Nihilus with the promise of a hidden Jedi academy on Telos 4. However, the truth was different. Telos had no Jedi gathering at all. Only Atris lived there, and she had fallen from the Jedi path and collected Sith artifacts. Still, Nihilus believed the lie completely. Thinking a great feast of Jedi awaited him, he flew towards Telos with the Ravager, expecting a rich meal of Force energy that didn't really exist. Mitra Surik knew Nihilus would attack, so she set up her own trap at Telos. She got both the Republic Navy and the Mandalorians to work together for defense. Admiral Carth Onasi brought the Republic fleet, and Mandalore the Preserver, leader of the Mandalorians, brought his warriors to help. They all knew that normal fighting alone would not stop Nihilus. After all, how do you fight someone who can eat whole planets? As a result, while their fleets fought Nihilus's escort ships in space, Surik and her allies got ready for the real plan. They would sneak onto Nihilus's own ship. The plan was to get on the Ravager and blow it up from the inside. and fight Nihilus face to face, while the space battle kept his forces busy outside. When Nihilus's Ravager reached Telos, a huge space battle started above the planet. Republic warships shot at Nihilus's Sith vessels, and Mandalorian fighters attacked the Ravager's guns directly. Space was filled with laser fire and explosions, but this battle was really just to distract Nihilus. Using this cover, Mitra Surik led a small team that sneaked onto the Ravager. This strike team had 3 people: Surik herself, Mandalore, who was really Canderous Ordo, and Visas Mar, who had now turned against her old master to help Surik. These 3 people carried the galaxy's only hope of beating Nihilus. They had 2 jobs on the Ravager: plant bombs to blow up the ship and fight Nihilus on the bridge. Walking through the broken hallways, Surik's team fought groups of Nihilus's slave soldiers. The ship itself seemed to cry out from Nihilus's dark power, its hallways dark and frightening. They fought brain-dead Sith soldiers at every corner. These walking corpses were Nihilus's newest victims, still doing his commands but with no minds left of their own. The strike team kept moving toward where the Dark Lord waited. Visas knew the Ravager's hallways well, so she led her friends through the ship's twisted paths. As they moved forward, she could feel Nihilus learning about the intruders on his ship. The dark side pushed down on them like a heavy weight. The whole ship was full of Nihilus's evil power. Then, Visas felt something she didn't expect. Through the force bond connecting her to Nihilus, she felt him getting confused. Nihilus's hunger had found the boarding team, but he could not see Mitra Surik properly. To Nihilus's force powers, the exile was something wrong, an empty space in the force, something he couldn't see or eat. This blind spot in what Nihilus could see would lead to his defeat. The death of emptiness. On the bridge, they found Darth Nihilus waiting for them. Just being near him was terrible. The air got cold and the shadows got darker, like all the darkness came together around him. Even the tough Mandalore felt scared when he saw him. This was not a man anymore, but a living, empty space that had taken a shape. Nihilus welcomed them with a terrible blast of his voice, a sound that hurt their minds with hunger and death. Yet then, something strange happened. Nihilus himself stopped moving. Through the Force, Visas could feel that he was confused. He could not understand what Mitra Surik was. His strongest power, the ability to drain life from his enemies, found nothing to grab when he tried it on the exile. For the first time since Malachor V, Darth Nihilus didn't know what to do. The person he wanted to eat was impossible to touch, an empty space he couldn't reach. And so the Lord of Hunger stopped to think. The shock of his failure made the Sith Lord freeze, unable to believe that for once his hunger couldn't touch what he wanted to eat. Since his main power didn't work, Nihilus had to try other attacks. He threw force energy at her, sent waves of darkness, tried everything to beat the exile. However, Mitra Surik stayed strong, fighting Nihilus with her lightsaber instead. Unlike all of Nihilus's other victims, Surik couldn't be beaten by his one special power. This fight had to be won with regular fighting. And when they fought with lightsabers, Nihilus's problems became clear. He wasn't used to fighting someone he couldn't drain strength from, so the exile's careful lightsaber attacks began to push him back. Every hit she landed made Nihilus weaker because he couldn't steal life energy to make himself stronger again. The Dark Lord had used his draining power for so long that, without it, he was losing to the skilled and brave Jedi exile. At one key moment, Nihilus threw Mitra Surik backwards with the Force, almost winning the fight. When Visas saw her friend in danger, she bravely jumped between them. She offered her own life to Nihilus in exchange for sparing Mitra Surik. At the same time, Mandalore ran forward, shooting his blaster and hitting the confused Sith Lord. While Nihilus was still stunned from the broken bond and hurt from Mandalore's attack, he couldn't defend himself. The exile got back up quickly, and together, Mitra Surik, Visas, and Mandalore attacked all at once, finally bringing Darth Nihilus down while he was weak. Darth Nihilus could barely stand now, yet he tried one more time to use his power. Unfortunately, there was nothing left for him to use. All his energy was gone, and there was no life around for him to eat. Right then, Mitra Surik moved forward and struck the final blow. Her lightsaber hit perfectly, cutting down the Lord of Hunger. Nihilus fell to the floor, unable to keep his body together anymore. After the battle ended, Visas walked over to where Nihilus had fallen. Maybe feeling sorry for him, or maybe just curious, she carefully took off his famous mask, wanting to see the face of the man he used to be. there was nothing there. Whatever was left of him disappeared completely. His robes dropped to the floor as his body turned to nothing. Darth Nihilus said no final words. There was nothing left to say, and nothing left of him to say it. So Darth Nihilus, the Lord of Hunger, was no more. The endless hunger that had driven him was put out at last, and the void he represented ate the last of his form as he died. Darth Nihilus had eaten entire worlds, yet died hollow and unfulfilled. Proof that unlimited power without purpose leads only to self-destruction.
Nihilus was a horror the galaxy created out of its own war, but not every nightmare is born inside this galaxy. Some of them wade past its edge, where none of the galaxy's rules apply.
Traveling beyond the galactic rim is not a matter of distance or navigation, because over the decades, every single attempt to cross the turbulence ended in disappearance. Every ship, every crew member, every piece of equipment vanished without a trace. When the first confirmed contact from outside the galaxy finally happened, it revealed exactly why. The beings that arrived brought biology, technology, and strategies completely different from anything in galactic civilizations. What followed showed the true scale of the threat: planetary warfare, decades of population manipulation, and methods of destruction that bypassed every normal defense. Both Canon and Legends sources reveal 5 key threats that make traveling outside the galaxy a confrontation with extinction. The barrier itself forms the first threat. Scientific evidence proves the galactic rim works as a physical barrier that no normal technology can overcome. In Legends continuity, specifically R.A. Salvatore's novel Vector Prime, scientists at the Exgal Society set up monitoring stations to study the galactic rim. Their research revealed critical information about what exists beyond the edge of mapped space. The Exgal 4 outpost on Belkadan focused specifically on Sector L30, which their calculations identified as the most likely breakthrough point for contact from outside the galaxy. According to the novel, the theory was straightforward. Turbulence existed beyond the small band of empty space surrounding the galaxy, possibly caused by crossing too near a tremendous gravity field. What made the barrier's nature clear was not survivors returning with warnings, but the fact that nothing ever returned. Several brave warriors and desperate outlaws entered the galactic rim turbulence over the last few decades, yet none were ever heard from again. The novel states this clearly: no distress signals were received, no emergency beacons activated, no debris fields were ever found. Before Yuuzhan Vong's arrival, no one had witnessed evidence of a breakthrough from outside the galaxy. Many scientists argued that such a breakthrough could not even be accomplished. The galactic rim worked as an absolute barrier through natural forces so powerful that normal technology could not overcome them. While scientists had theories about causes ranging from gravitational problems to hyperspace disruptions, the practical result was always the same. Then, something proved the scientists wrong. The outpost detected the breakthrough on their monitoring equipment. 3 enormous world ships, each 10 kilometers across, made entirely of living coral, pushed through the turbulence at Vector Prime, where countless explorers had vanished. The novel describes these vessels as massive living constructs powered by creatures called Dovan basils, organisms capable of locking onto specific gravity fields across millions of kilometers. Within days of detection, all 15 Exgal 4 scientists were killed before transmitting a single warning. Yeoman Carr, a Yuuzhan Vong spy embedded in the outpost for years, released a biological weapon called a molecular plague. Within hours, the weapon transformed Belkadan's atmosphere into toxic yellow-green clouds. Meanwhile, the freighter was sabotaged beyond repair. Communications were severed before any distress signal could be sent. One scientist, Jerem Kadmir, received what the Yuuzhan Vong considered an honorable death when Yeoman Carr broke his neck rather than letting him suffer through the plague. Beyond the immediate casualties, the planet itself began changing. Its entire ecosystem systematically rewritten to support Yorick coral growth. This was humanity's first confirmed contact from outside the galaxy, resulting in total destruction. What crosses that barrier forms the second threat. Invasions from outside the galaxy bring threats that evolved in complete isolation from galactic civilization. The Yuuzhan Vong invasion proves the scale of this danger. The novel reveals extensive details about what crossed the void between galaxies, why their biology and culture represented something beyond any threat the galaxy had previously encountered. The Yuuzhan Vong came from a different galaxy entirely. Their homeworld, Yuuzhan Tar, was destroyed in religious warfare that tore their civilization apart. As a result, the survivors spent generations traveling through the darkness between galaxies in massive world ships, a journey lasting centuries through the void between galaxies. During this time, they had to survive with no sunlight, no planets, no resources except what they carried. To survive, their solution was to make everything alive. Every piece of their technology was biological rather than mechanical, grown and shaped for specific purposes rather than built from metal and circuits. Physically, Yeoman Carr's observations reveal they averaged a dozen centimeters taller than humans, quite a bit heavier, with significantly less body hair. But it was their culture that truly set them apart. They valued ritual scarring and body modification as marks of devotion, with intentional disfigurement indicating rank and spiritual progress. Yeoman Carr's features showed this devotion: an often broken nose, an extended tear to his lip, a split eyelid, all intentionally inflicted. These remarkable tattoos and intentional disfigurements served as markers of rank within the warrior caste, with nearly complete tattoo coverage indicating the highest positions. This cultural emphasis on biological modification extended to their technology, which showed sophistication that mechanical engineering could not match. For example, the Uglith masker showed this approach, embedding thousands of tiny tendrils in the wearer's pores to create a complete human disguise, though removal caused intense agony. Similarly, a Nullith attached to the face with pincers, while a central tendril snaked down the throat to provide oxygen. Amphistaffs worked as adaptive weapons, serpents that could harden to stone consistency or become flexible whips depending on need. Even their vessels reflected this philosophy. Coral skippers could refuel by eating rocks, while Vondoon crabshell armor was grown rather than forged. But the true strategic advantage came from a different creation. The Yammusk served as a telepathic war coordinator capable of breaking minds as easily as it coordinated armies. The novel, Vector Prime, describes this creature in extensive detail. It resembled their god of war, Unyamka the Slayer, with a gigantic brain-like bulk featuring a single huge eye, a puckered maw, many tentacles extending from that bulk. The Yammusk stationed at Helska 4 was so massive that its bulbous portion rested in deep water beneath the ice, while tentacles stretched 100 kilometers long throughout the underwater base. Beyond its physical presence, the War Coordinator's capabilities proved devastating to enemy forces. It could bring scattered units into tight focus, allowing coral skippers to fly in perfect unison, making them many times more efficient in combat. This common bond extended to all Yuuzhan Vong warriors, working as a telepathic network that coordinated entire armies across vast distances. Additionally, the Yammusk could produce offspring that were trained immediately through mental joining with the parent, allowing rapid expansion of their command structure. However, the creature's most dangerous capability operated on individual targets rather than fleets. Through direct telepathic contact, it could shave away sensibilities until prisoners were left broken, their minds snapped from waves of promised horrors. When Jedi Knight Miko Reglia was subjected to this treatment, he experienced telepathic despair so powerful that his training provided no defense. Those exposed found they could not close their eyes, forced instead to watch their impending consumption while thin tendrils pulled them toward the Yammusk's maw. When all these advantages came together in a coordinated invasion, the destruction was absolute. In Legends continuity, the new Essential Guide to Alien Species records that the Yuuzhan Vong War lasted 5 years and killed an estimated 365 trillion sentient beings. They destroyed entire planets using a tactic called Yogan's Core, perfected by a legendary general in the ancient Kremlivian War. The process requires dropping a powerful Dovan basal to the planet's surface. Once deployed, it focuses one beam on the planet's core, the other on the passing moon, creating an inevitable gravitational catastrophe. Cernpedal became one of the first demonstrations of this method's effectiveness. When a Dovan basal was deployed on the surface, it pulled the moon Dobido out of orbit, triggering catastrophic tidal forces and geological upheaval across the planet. As the moon descended toward inevitable collision, Republic forces mounted desperate evacuation efforts. Chewbacca remained on the surface, coordinating rescue operations when Dobido finally impacted, crushing him, making him one of the first major casualties of the war. The third threat operates through manipulation rather than force. The unknown regions harbor civilizations that plan destruction across decades-long timelines. The Grisks represent a coordinated threat potentially more dangerous than direct invasion. In canon continuity, specifically Timothy Zahn's Thrawn Ascendancy trilogy, it reveals extensive information about threats operating beyond the edge of map space. The Chiss Ascendancy faces these threats in a region they call the Chaos, an area where hyperspace navigation is so dangerous that they rely on force-sensitive children called Skywalkers to guide their ships. Throughout the trilogy, particularly in Lesser Evil, Zahn explains that Skywalkers navigate through third sight, a mysterious ability that allows Chiss children to perceive dangers in hyperspace and maneuver around them. Without Skywalkers, navigation through the chaos takes several times longer, requiring jump-by-jump calculations where a single mistake can send a ship flying off course. The novel describes specific systems like Rapak as surrounded by variable electromagnetic fluxes, littered with asteroids that limit hyperspace entry to only a handful of vectors. These natural barriers make most systems nearly impossible to reach without precise navigation coordinates. Protected by these natural barriers, the Grisks operate from hidden locations and conceal their true appearance completely behind veils and armor with self-destruct systems. No one has ever seen what they look like, and the Lesser Evil novel describes the results of this secrecy clearly. When Grisks are eliminated in combat, their bodies explode with enough force to cause collateral damage to anything nearby, including their own comrades. What remains gives no clues to their biology or origin. Though their appearance remains hidden, their power is impossible to ignore. A single Grisk warship called Fate Spinner, classified as a Shatter-class Warmaster, could destroy an entire battle fleet in 2 hours. This level of military superiority forces even powerful species to serve the Grisks rather than resist them. Throughout Lesser Evil, Grisk representatives deliver explicit threats about who lives or perishes at their pleasure. The second book in the trilogy, Greater Good, reveals how a single Grisk agent planned the near-total destruction of an entire civilization in just 6 months using only 50 infiltrators. This agent, known as Jixtus, wore full veils that concealed his identity completely, served as a coordinator of Grisk operations. Rather than deploying armies or fleets, he relied on precision manipulation. 50 infiltrators called Agbui spread throughout the target population, methodically identifying pressure points, exploiting cultural tensions. The results demonstrated the effectiveness of this approach. Within 6 months, civil war spread across the planet as gray-black clouds covered the atmosphere. City lights across the surface went dark. The engineered internal conflict caused the civilization to destroy itself. The Grisks have been planning Chiss destruction for at least 20 years, adapting their strategy as new generations of leaders emerged. In Greater Good, Jixtus acknowledges that 20 years ago, even 10 years ago, he would have said destruction of the Chiss Ascendancy would be straightforward. However, he adapted his strategy as a new generation of leaders emerged. The novel shows him specifically recognizing Thrawn, Bakif, Arlani, and different types of leaders who think and plan outside normal patterns. The trilogy's final volume, Lesser Evil, establishes the broader scope of Grisk's ambitions. Beyond the Chiss, other nations existed throughout the chaos, all designated for conquest. Once these fall, the main galaxy becomes the next target. The Grisks view lesser space as future territory, with the unknown regions serving merely as the opening phase of a much larger campaign. The Grisks represent strategic manipulation, but other unknown regions' threats employ more direct brutality. The Vagari, documented in the Unknown Regions sourcebook, developed warfare tactics that contradicted every principle of civilized conflict. These nomadic pirates systematically captured prisoners from conquered worlds, then chained them in transparent pods welded to the exterior hulls of their warships. As a result, living captives worked as defensive barriers, forcing their opponents into an impossible choice: either destroy the captives to stop the Vagari vessels or allow the raiders to operate without resistance. For years, this tactic terrorized entire sectors until the Chiss Ascendancy finally encountered a Vagari armada in battle. Commander Thrawn eliminated the fleet, yet survivors managed to flee deeper into unexplored space. According to the sourcebook, their ultimate fate remains unknown, which demonstrates a persistent pattern throughout the unknown regions. Defeated threats do not surrender or integrate into galactic society. Instead, they retreat into uncharted territory, potentially regrouping across decades or even centuries before emerging again with adapted tactics. What appears eliminated may simply be waiting beyond the current detection range. The fourth threat defies every biological framework. The unknown regions contains entities that exist beyond normal understanding of life. The Mingle represents the most documented example of what lurks beyond map space. In Legends continuity, the 2010 sourcebook, The Unknown Regions, documents extensive information about threats lurking in unexplored territory. The sourcebook describes Mingle as thick, gray ooze that smells of sweet rot. This substance covers the planet Mugfallow from pole to pole, forming a world ocean of living matter. Unlike static organisms, the entity shapeshifts constantly, creating pseudopods, fanged mouths, eyes on stalks, crawling worms, bat-like flyers as needed. Its origin remains unknown, though some theories suggest it may be from another dimension or another galaxy, tied to reports of shapeless beings from beyond known space. Mingle's age remains unknown, though some sources associate it with the Celestials era circa 30,000 years before the Battle of Yavin. If accurate, the hyperspace anomaly bisecting the galaxy may have separated the entity's influence from celestial projects during that era, suggesting it predates most galactic civilizations. While its origins remain disputed, its capabilities are extensively recorded. The infection demonstrates biological warfare refined over millennia. According to the sourcebook, Mingle erupts from concealed pools, spreading across its prey's faces before entering through mouths and nostrils. Once inside, the substance penetrates the cranium, consuming blood and muscle tissue to increase its own mass. Within 24 hours, the process is complete. What remains is a hollowed shell filled with the entity's material, with the original consciousness destroyed. However, the body continues working under Mingle's control. These animated hosts display vacant stares and jerky movements despite having no pulse or respiration. When they speak, their voices carry an unnatural buzzing quality with no emotional inflection. Within 7 days, visible decomposition begins as gray fluid seeps from every opening, while the body remains ambulatory. Alternative infection occurs through ingestion of even small amounts. Targets who swallow bean-sized portions experience the same internal consumption over several days, remaining fully conscious throughout the process as the entity systematically hollows them from within. What makes Mingle nearly impossible to eliminate is not its infection method, but its psychological strategy. According to the Unknown Regions sourcebook, Mingle employs documented psychological warfare techniques. Records show the entity repeatedly uses reanimated family members, particularly children, to emotionally manipulate survivors into compromising security systems or opening protective barriers. the planet Mug Fallow serves as its central intelligence, now utterly lifeless except for fossilized tree trunks. A ring of derelict warships orbits the world, including rare Gree sail ships, Zim the Despot's treasure barge. Meanwhile, gray pools lurk in caverns and sewer systems across thousands of infected worlds, meaning the entity maintains a distributed presence throughout explored space. While immune to blasters and edged weapons, the substance can be eliminated through fire, acid, poison, or noxious chemicals applied in wide areas. However, destroying individual pools does not eliminate the central intelligence on Mug Fallow. While Mingle Mingle represents biological conquest, another unknown region's threat weaponizes decay. The sorcerers of Rand exist in unique states of disassembly and decay, according to the sourcebook. Chronicler Suket documented encounters revealing their varied forms. Some lacked skin entirely, oozed fluids with each movement, while others existed as blackened skeletons somehow maintaining animation. Some appeared turned inside out with teeth protruding from raw tissue, though the most disturbing manifested as ribbons of flesh swirling through chambers. Their movement proves equally varied, with some hovering above the ground, others scuttling on multiple legs, still others flapping on wings while refusing to descend. Beyond their physical horror, their philosophy sets them apart from all known Force users. Rather than viewing the Force as energy created by life, they worship the dark as the ultimate end of all existence. In their belief system, destruction is inevitable, represents the only true power source. As a result, they reject both Jedi and Sith concepts as limited perspectives, claiming instead to commune with fundamental reality rather than an energy field generated by living things. To pursue this philosophy without interference, they maintain complete isolation. Their base of operations lies deep in the unknown regions within the Perrin Nebula, protected by 12 outpost worlds, accessible only with specific coordinates or Force user guidance. Their belief in inevitable destruction manifests through specific abilities. These powers manipulate decay and death in ways no other Force users have achieved. The fifth lurks even in familiar territory. Extreme dangers exist in relatively well-mapped regions of space, proving that cosmic hazards are not limited to invasion from outside the galaxy or unknown regions exploration. In canon continuity, specifically the 2018 novelization Solo: A Star Wars Story Expanded Edition by Mur Lafferty, the Kessel region demonstrates that naturally occurring hazards and space-dwelling predators can be as deadly as any alien invasion. The Acades Maelstrom near Kessel combines every imaginable spaceflight hazard into a single region. The novelization describes it as ionized gas and debris swirling around a massive gravity well, with temporal distortion making it impossible to plot a direct course through. According to the droid navigator L337, ships that enter the Maelstrom do not return. Inside exist carbon bergs the size of planets, colliding with each other within massive electrical storms that render standard sensors useless. The standard Kessel run requires over 20 parsecs to navigate around the Maelstrom, but Han Solo completed it in under 12 parsecs by cutting directly through. This achievement saved approximately 25 to 30 light-years of travel distance while requiring simultaneous navigation through temporal distortion, gravity anomalies, electrical storms, planet-sized obstacles, and complete sensor blackout. However, the Maelstrom contains more than environmental hazards. The Summa Verminoth encountered during Han's run proves that life can adapt to even the most extreme conditions. This creature measures equal to an Imperial Star Destroyer at approximately 1,600 meters long, floating dormant in electrical storms that would destroy normal ships. The novelization describes it covered in eyes across every surface, constantly watching for prey. Its tentacles naturally conduct high-voltage electrical currents, indicating evolutionary adaptation to an environment lethal to most carbon-based life. When potential prey enters its territory, the entire organism activates from dormancy. Its hunting strategy demonstrates sophisticated predatory behavior as tentacles spread wide to form cage-like structures, trapping ships while suckers and stingers prepared to breach hulls or consume vessels entirely. During the Kessel Run, the Summa Verminoth pursued the Millennium Falcon toward the Maw, a planet-sized gravity well that prevents escape once ships cross the event horizon. Gravitational effects cause temporal distortion, making the creature's death appear to occur in slow motion. Its tentacles stretched beyond structural limits, snapped as different portions were consumed by the gravity well at different rates. The creature's eyes bulged from internal pressure as tidal forces stretched its body in some directions while crushing it in others. Despite its size and strength, it was systematically pulled apart by gravitational forces that no biological organism can withstand. The Summa Verminoth's death demonstrates a critical principle. Even apex predators evolved for extreme environments cannot survive conditions beyond their biological limits. These 5 documented threats reveal why the galactic rim works as an absolute barrier, not because it actively defends, but because normal technology and strategic frameworks fail completely in conditions beyond familiar space. What successfully crosses evolves specifically to bypass every assumption galactic civilization makes about warfare, biology, diplomacy, and the Force itself. Geographic isolation, not superior capability, explains why the galaxy has survived contact with these threats. When that isolation breaks down, casualties are measured in trillions.
The threats beyond the rim stayed out because the galaxy could never reach them, but the distance was never the only thing to fear, because some of the deadliest things were never out past the edge at all. They were already inside the galaxy, waiting in its oldest and darkest corners. One creature in the Star Wars galaxy frightened the Jedi and the Sith for the same reason, and that reason was not size or raw strength. Its name was the Terentatek, and it killed through silence. It was invisible to the Force. A Jedi stepping into a Korriban cave would have their training, the Force, and every tool the Order gave them, but none of it would register the creature already crossing the floor towards them. Telekinesis lands and does nothing. A Jedi who tries to redirect the creature's aggression, calm its mind, or push it aside through the Force gets nothing back. The Jedi Academy training manual records that the creature's body carries a remarkable immunity to the Force, which earned it the nickname Jedi Killer across the Order's archives. Yet the bright snap and unmistakable hum of an activated lightsaber reach it perfectly, with both the light and the sound drawing it forward. Codex material from Star Wars: The Old Republic describes Terentateks as legendary, deadly beasts armed with venomous tusks and claws. So once the saber has their attention, the Jedi has a blade and nothing else. The Jedi is also rarely facing one creature, since the training manual notes that Terentateks patrol their territory in mated pairs, which means a Jedi expecting one opponent was already outnumbered before crossing the threshold. A Rancor or a Krayt Dragon can kill a Jedi, but they attack whatever is closest. They do not distinguish a Force user from a soldier. The Terentatek does, and it was designed to. The Terentatek outlived the alchemists who bred it, and neither the Jedi nor the Sith could leash it again. The Terentatek is older than the Great Sith War, and Exar Kun older than the Sith Order itself. Beneath the surface of Korriban, in a sanctum sealed for more than 10,000 years, the body of a Terentatek lay preserved in the dark. Sorza Sin recorded the find in Book of Sith, Secrets from the Dark Side. She was one of 12 Dark Jedi cast out of the early Jedi Order, and a founder of what would become the Sith Empire. She walked into that sanctum with slaves and torches, and came out with scrolls of Sith alchemy and a corpse that should not have already existed. The Terentatek was not an accident, it was made. Her chronicle identifies the creators as the Kasai, the priestly alchemy caste of the original Sith species, who bred war beasts the way other cultures bred war horses, except their stock was shaped by ritual and dark side energy rather than patient mating. Later Jedi records would theorize a base species, suggesting Rancors twisted by Sith experimentation into something the original animal could no longer recognize. According to Sorzan, the creature feeds on Force-rich blood and hunts Sith purebloods exclusively, the very species the alchemists who built it came from. They designed a predator to crave the blood of their own species, knew the retaliation would be certain, and bred it anyway. The Sith built a precision instrument and got something cruder. Other alchemical creations, like the Battle Hydra, remain controllable by Force-sensitive Darksiders, serving as shock troops that march where their masters pointed. Sith alchemy could produce a leash, yet the Terenditech was the creation that broke it. Once the Kasai were dust, and the rituals were lost, the Terenditech was not a connoisseur. It did not favor Jedi or other Force users over other prey. It neither honored Sith hierarchy, nor hesitated because the thing in front of it bowed to the dark side. The only Force-related stimulus it reliably tracked was the light and sound of an activated lightsaber. By the time of the Great Sith War, the Terenditechs wander Korriban, Kashyyyk, and a dozen other worlds the dark side has touched. In the aftermath of Exar Kun's defeat, when the Jedi Council looks at the map of the galaxy and tries to count the creatures still moving in the ruins, they realize the war did not end when Kun fell. These are not lurking creatures, since Legends records from the Old Republic era describe Terenditechs destroying Jedi outposts in this period, killing trained Force users in the field, rather than waiting to be hunted. The Council is responding to attacks, not rumors, and the first hunters it sends are the Jedi Shadows. The Shadows are the Order's specialists, sent into Darkside ruins and holocron caches wherever the Force had gone sour. They went into Terenditech lairs and kill what they found, but the losses mounted faster than the kills. The Council escalated, taking the Shadow Specialist project and handing it to the wider Order. During the Restoration period, between 3995 and 3966 BBY, the Jedi wiped out the Macroza Order from the Tapani sector, and the Great Hunt turned the Order into a kill team. What began with the Jedi Shadows eventually expanded into a crusade undertaken by much of the galaxy, with the sole purpose of wiping Terenditechs and other Sith spawn from the galaxy. The Council authorized hunting expeditions into the catacombs of the Valley of the Sith Lords with a single objective, codified a new sentinel technique called Master of the Great Hunt to make its people sharper and more precise against beasts touched by the dark side, and sent them in bonded pairs because inside a Terenditech's lair, the dark side was thick enough to suffocate a single mind. One trio did not survive, and the Council lost all three before the hunt was over. His name was Duran Keldroma. He was a cousin of Ulic, the fallen Jedi Knight whose betrayal during the Great Sith War had made the Keldroma name a synonym for betrayal. Duran, younger and less famous, carrying that name into rooms where it was no longer welcome, volunteered for the Great Hunt. He destroyed Sith remnants in the cleansing of the Nine Houses and went after the nightmare creations the alchemists had left behind, including Cylon, giant worms, and Terenditechs. He was paired with a Twi'lek named Shayla Nur and a third Jedi named Gunhan Suresh. Somewhere along the hunt, Shayla and Duran fell in love, and Gun, feeling the bond between them shift into something that would not hold under pressure, warned them and argued with them, and when neither worked, left. He went to Kashyyyk alone, down into the Shadowlands where the dark side ran as thick as it did on Korriban, and died there, overwhelmed without a partner, in exactly the conditions the Council had paired him to avoid. Duran died next on Korriban. Shayla went back into the lair alone, and the records say only that she was overcome. The trio the Council had bound together to survive the hunt was gone, and the Terenditechs were not. Duran and Shayla were not the only pair the hunt consumed. The effort was ultimately futile. The hunters did not lack skill. The dark side saturating the lair eroded discipline and coordination long before the creature moved, and by the time it did, the Jedi who walked in together were no longer working as a unit. They died alone or fractured. The failure of the Great Hunt proved the warning had been right all along. The warning came from the woman who founded Sith bioalchemy, directed at her own successors, about a creature she understood better than anyone alive, and what she told them was that it could not be kept safely. Many of these creatures still existed centuries and millennia afterward. They never reached extinction because the creatures retreated into darkside strongholds and went still, not in the animal sense of hibernation, but in a darkside suspension that kept their bodies alive without food, water, or warmth. When the dark side weakens across the galaxy, Terenditechs slip into a slumber that can last for hundreds or even thousands of years, and when the dark side rises again, they emerge to threaten everything around them. The Jedi tried extermination, and it did not work. The dark side produced the Terenditech, not biology, so killing one was never final, while the dark side could still ride. Korriban's tombs almost certainly still hold at least one. The chamber would be sealed, the air stale, and the stone floor cold enough that nothing living should be inside it. The Tyranitek would have no memory of the Great Hunt and no knowledge of Doran, Shayla, or Goon. It would have been asleep for longer than most governments last, drawing on the dark side to keep its body alive in the dark. No Jedi alive today would have a reason to remember it was there, and a Tyranitek can outlast being forgotten. The first Sith bred the Tyranitek, in an age most of the galaxy has forgotten, but to understand where a creature like that could even come from, you have to go back further, to a time before the Jedi and the Sith existed at all. The very first Force users split into light and dark, and that split created everything that followed. Their full story is waiting next.